Following generations of persistence, humanity finally achieved the creation of true magic, an advancement that arose naturally rather than by design. They soon sought to link this power to their bloodlines, making it hereditary so that it could be preserved and passed down to every subsequent generation. As magical abilities gradually emerged among the population, the creators sought to preserve their legacy by ensuring these powers were strictly inherited through ancestral bloodlines. Ustia is a land famously recognized as the nation of magic. In this society, the nobility employs magic to defend the populace against monsters and invaders, securing their elite status and significant privileges in return for their protection. Within the realm's magical nobility, the House of Marquis Friendbride holds a position of great prestige. The family's newest member, an infant named Hermes, is the designated successor to the title. From a young age, he displayed such immense magical power that he was quickly recognized as a true prodigy. Once a powerful ducal house, the Friendbride family was demoted to the rank of Marquis after generations passed without a magically gifted heir. Now viewed as a declining lineage, the family's remaining hopes rest entirely on Hermes. They viewed this as a miracle, believing it was the key to restoring their family's former glory. 4 years later, Hermes rushed to his father, eager to share some news. After excelling in his magic lessons, his teacher noted that he possessed the highest potential among his peers, prompting his proud father to declare that he would become the most powerful mage their family had ever seen. Hermes is constantly surrounded by praise, burdened by the high expectations of everyone around him. His father envisions him rivaling the power of legendary kings and ancient ancestors, while his peers admire him and his teachers wait expectantly to see the true extent of his inherited magic. Through it all, Hermes remains composed, meeting these demands with unwavering confidence and resolve. Chris, Hermes' brother, lived under constant scrutiny, as his father frequently belittled him for failing to demonstrate the same level of magical talent. In contrast to Hermes, who is praised as a role model, Chris is frequently dismissed as pathetic. Lineage magic is introduced as a specialized power inherited directly through a family's bloodline. Adding to Chris's mounting stress, Hermes engaged in an animated conversation with Katya, his childhood friend, and the heir to another duchy. He explained that lineage magic is a privilege reserved for the nobility, far surpassing ordinary spells in power. However, Katya was more interested in playing than listening, though Hermes continued his enthusiastic lecture regardless. Hermes shares his dream of becoming a heroic mage, much like the legendary figures he admires. Recognizing his profound love for the craft, Katya offers her encouragement, fully believing in his potential to succeed. As time passed, Hermes stayed focused on his objective, eventually reaching the age of 7. As Hermes undergoes his magical assessment, the examiner discovers that the boy possesses no trace of lineage magic. The group is left in shock when a power that should have surfaced by now fails to appear, forcing Hermes to face the harsh reality that he doesn't possess the strength everyone anticipated. The kingdom's evaluator officially confirmed that Hermes lacked any magical talent, noting his aptitude was a flat 0. His father is left reeling by the news, unable to fathom his heir's failure, while the crowd laments that Hermes was overlooked by the heavens. In this world, magical power is dictated by blood purity, a cruel twist of fate that has nothing to do with a person's actual worth. Overwhelmed by frustration, Hermes' father sank into despair as he realized his schemes to reclaim the Duke title through his son had ultimately failed. Overwhelmed by fury, he berates Hermes for his incompetence and launches a brutal assault, showing total indifference to the boy's shock and pain. Following the assault on Hermes, his father imprisoned him and subjected him to relentless humiliation, labeling him as worthless and threatening to cast him out onto the streets. He showed such intense loathing that even sharing the same heir as his son repulsed him, leaving a stunned Hermes to cry out in desperation as he was ignored. In a state of desperation, Ernie pleads for another chance, vowing to do whatever it takes to become the mage his father envisioned, only to be heartlessly dismissed as a defective product. He declared that without lineage magic, Hermes would never become the son he aspired to be, as he had been forsaken by the god of the stars. Hermes' father denounces him as the spawn of a demon rather than a divine gift, declaring that he will only be granted freedom if he miraculously manifests his lineage magic. Despite his own skepticism, he locked the cell and walked away, leaving Hermes alone at a moment that would forever alter the course of his life. Trapped and losing hope, Hermes reflects on his time in captivity, fearing that his inability to use lineage magic has sealed his fate. Just when all hope seemed lost, his brother Chris appeared before the cell with a mysterious smile, and Ernie recognized him immediately. Chris claimed he had come to provide magic lessons to his younger brother, while simultaneously revealing that he was already aware of the entire situation. He eagerly demonstrates his abilities, boasting of being chosen by God. With a wide smile, He unleashes his magic in a grand theatrical display that leaves Hermes completely stunned. Wearing a cruel smile, Chris unleashed his magic against Hermes, believing the assault might finally awaken his brother's dormant potential. Hermes is slammed against the wall, left wounded as Chris looks down on him with utter disdain, labeling him as pathetic. Chris admitted his actions were a form of punishment, fueled by resentment toward Hermes for ignoring him while being their father's favorite. Nursing his wounds, Hermes came to the painful realization that his own joy in mastering magic and receiving praise had blinded him to Chris's isolation, leaving him to finally feel the heavy burden of his neglect. Chris declares his intention to usurp Hermes as the heir and fulfill his dream of becoming a great mage, leaving the humiliated Hermes to weep in his cell as he laughs and departs. Shortly after, a girl approached the cell and checked to see if he was all right. Finding Hermes wounded and held captive, Katya was struck with disbelief when she realized her father and Chris were the ones behind it. Feeling helpless that her magic couldn't mend his wounds, she took his hand and apologized, remarking that no one should ever be subjected to such cruelty. A resigned Hermes describes himself as defective, claiming that simply having enough to eat is sufficient, but Katya firmly cuts him off. She expressed her unwavering belief in him, noting that his intense desire for magic and tireless work ethic made it impossible for him to lack lineage magic, and she vowed to never give up on him. Offering firm encouragement, Kochi assured Hermes that he would eventually become a powerful mage and stand by her side once more. Spurred on by Katya's encouragement, Hermes regains his resolve and remembers that mastering lineage magic is his ticket to freedom. With a renewed smile, he vows to keep trying and thanks her for restoring his sense of hope. Realizing she's been spotted, Katya prepares to leave, making it clear that she despises seeing those she cares about in captivity. Driven by resolve, she gave Hermes a firm promise that he would escape, and his hopeful smile signaled the start of a significant shift in their journey. Despite the suffering he endured in that wretched place, Hermes remained completely focused on uncovering his magical potential. Driven by his resolve to escape and Katya's unwavering support, he found the strength to press on. These two sources of strength bolstered his resolve, ensuring he remained focused on his goal. Despite 3 years of dedicated effort, Hermes found that his situation hadn't changed in the slightest. Though Hermes is initially thrilled to see Katya again, his joy quickly turns to shock when she sadly reveals she won't be returning, leaving him completely stunned by her apology. Katya discloses that she is being forced into a marriage with Aster, the second prince, who is both the primary candidate for the throne and the most powerful practitioner of lineage magic. She explains that as the heir to a duchy, she considers the offer an honor and has no reason to decline, prompting a surprised Hermes to ask if she truly intends to accept. Katya attempted to postpone the wedding by at least 6 months, but Chris arrived with a group of guards and effectively blocked any chance of a delay. He explains that her engagement to Prince Aster has restored the Friendbreed family's status among the high nobility, leaving Hermes and Katya stunned by Chris's icy resolve and firm conviction. Katya is overcome with rage upon learning the prince has refused to see Hermes, while a boastful Chris reveals that his own talents have earned him the position of Prince Aster's right-hand man. He explained that his entire family is bound to the prince's service, clarifying that Hermes' imprisonment was a direct command that would not be overturned. Claiming he had no use for anyone lacking magical talent, Prince Aster issued a cold order for Hermes to be eliminated. Following his orders, Chris commanded the guards to seize Hermes, while Katya was forcibly held back as she tried to protest the cruel treatment. While being forcibly removed, Hermes calls out to Katya, who vows to negotiate with the prince to secure his release. As Katya desperately calls out to him, Hermes remains lost in silence, questioning how he might finally earn his father's love and the favor of the gods. Suffering in his isolation, he yearns for the recognition he's been denied, unable to understand why he is met with such constant contempt. Hermes awoke in a grim, derelict environment, surrounded by people living in absolute misery. Disoriented and unsure of his surroundings, the suspicious looks from the crowd only deepened his sense of isolation and fear. Several men wearing suspicious grins approached Hermes, inquiring if he was traveling by himself. Overwhelmed by the sudden realization of danger, he gives in to panic and desperately tries to escape. Overwhelmed by desperation, he thought of Katya and wished for a rescue, feeling the sheer terror of being completely defenseless. Hermes attempted to flee, but the men quickly caught and restrained him. The group ridiculed the noble for traveling solo, with one thug forcing him to stay while another physically restrained him. Despite Hermes' desperate struggles and pleas for release, he was completely cornered and overwhelmed. The attackers debated whether to sell or enslave Hermes, eventually concluding that he was too weak and insignificant to even be worth a ransom. Fueled by their intense resentment toward the aristocracy, the group begins a vicious assault with the intent to kill. Hermes lies battered on the ground, forced to witness the depths of human cruelty while unable to fight back. battered and pushed to his limit. Hermes questioned if his sacrifices were all for nothing, as an attacker closed in with a blade and a cruel smirk. He feared his life would end before he could ever earn the recognition he craved, leaving him desperate for any outcome other than this. Just as Hermes was about to be struck by the blade, a sudden bolt of lightning hit his attackers and put an end to the assault. Emerging from the background, a commanding woman approached with a firm stride and ordered them to halt. Lying injured on the ground, Hermes was taken aback to see the thugs staring at her with looks of genuine fear. Watching the scene with visible contempt, the woman remarked that her good mood was ruined upon finding a group of adults ganging up on a child. She voiced her disgust at the repulsive sight, while Hermes looked on, stunned by her commanding and formidable presence. With a sharp and confident look, the woman expressed how much she would enjoy defeating those cowards. The thugs responded with a mixture of fury and utter disbelief. They shouted for her to clear the area as they began activating their magic circles. Unfazed, she stood her ground and faced the group head-on. With a single, decisive motion, she neutralized every attacker with overwhelming force, sending them flying while she remained perfectly composed amidst the wreckage. Hermes looked on in disbelief as she offered a sarcastic smile, casually remarking on how frightening the experience had been. Hermes watched in disbelief as the woman unleashed fire, ice, and wind magic simultaneously, questioning how she could wield multiple elements when most are restricted to a single lineage. As the spell's force levels the surrounding area, he realizes that her raw output is staggering, even when using basic magic. Hermes looked on in disbelief as the onlookers finally began to grasp the true extent of the woman's immense power. Known as the Walking Catastrophe, Rose is a feared witch of the skies who commands both immense magical power and a terrifying presence. Irritated by their lack of respect, Rose mocked the men for their slow realization of her identity, and scolded them for assuming her ordinary magic meant weakness, right before preparing to showcase her true power as a special gift. Rose begins a powerful incantation, summoning a massive magic circle as she declares she will demonstrate magic befitting her status, a power that bridges the gap between heaven and earth. As the air crackles with energy, her enemies can only watch in terror. Rose triggered her lineage magic, Lidsky Elf, emitting a powerful light that swept across the entire area. The surrounding enemies are struck head-on, frozen in place before they can even react. The sheer power she displays makes it evident that she operates on a level far beyond the rest, firmly establishing her status as an elite mage. Rose looks down at the fallen thugs, making it clear that she only neutralized them rather than taking their lives. With visible contempt, she dismisses them as not being worth the effort of killing. She then approaches Hermes to assure him that he is finally safe. Surprised and relieved, the boy gazes up at the woman who just rescued him with such effortless strength. Hermes shouts a warning to Warren Rose about a long-range magical projectile targeting him from behind. Reacting instantly, she identified the threat and leveled the building the attack originated from in a single motion, coldly noting the shooter's presence and admitting her enemies were better prepared than she had anticipated. Rose complimented Hermes on his sharp perception, impressed that he could detect the magic from such a great distance. She commended his remarkable skill, confessing that she had never encountered anyone more talented than herself. Stunned into silence, Hermes listened as Rose introduced herself and confessed that he had caught her eye. This was Hermes von Frindbreed, a boy who had reached his lowest point at just 7 years old, but who had finally found the opportunity to turn his life around. Rose identified herself as the witch and took a keen interest in Hermes' potential, signaling a major shift in the young boy's future. Hermes expresses his gratitude for the rescue, but Rose brushes it off by claiming she only attacked out of frustration, until something strange suddenly catches her eye. Despite his unassuming appearance, Hermes managed to sense a long-range attack, hinting at a hidden depth to his abilities. Hermes broke into tears as the weight of his father's words came rushing back to him. He attempted to explain his desire to follow in Rose's footsteps as a mage, but he soon broke down over his lack of power. Though Rose was initially startled and feared he was injured, she quickly realized his pain was far more than just physical. Hermes vents his frustration, lamenting that no matter how hard he works, he'll never receive the recognition he deserves. Sensing his distress, Rose approaches him calmly and offers to listen to his story. He opened up about his family's abandonment and the loss of his only friend, while Rose listened in silence, truly empathizing with the isolation he had endured. Rose pulls Hermes into a tight embrace, offering comfort as she acknowledges the depth of his pain. With a stern expression, she condemns the arrogant nobles who act superior despite relying on the strength of others, noting that little ever truly changes in this world. However, she quickly reassures Hermes, telling him that his lack of lineage magic doesn't define him, and that he shouldn't believe the lies others tell him. Rose was caught off guard when Hermes confirmed that he didn't possess any lineage magic. Thrilled by his potential, she praised his exceptional magic manipulation and detection, describing him as a diamond in the rough whose talent she refused to let go to waste. Rose is thrilled by Hermes' cuteness and even mentions wanting to take him home, leaving him feeling flustered and confused by the sudden praise. Recognizing she had overstepped, Rose regained her composure and addressed him by name with a calm, serious tone. Rose inquired whether Hermes truly had a passion for magic. He offered a firm, confident response, but soon admitted that without a magical bloodline, he could never become the mage he once envisioned. Even so, he gave a sincere smile, reaffirming his deep love for magic. Rose gripped Hermes firmly, stating it was time to clear up his misconception, while acknowledging that lineage magic possesses a level of power that effort alone can never replicate. While soaring through the skies, Rose explains that lineage magic is merely an inherited gift rather than a guarantee of true power. She criticizes those who rely solely on their birthright, noting that many become complacent and stop striving for real strength, leaving Hermes surprised by her blunt perspective. Rose explains that magic is a product of human logic rather than a divine miracle, asserting that while lineage magic is potent, anyone with enough dedication can craft their own spells, a revelation that leaves Hermes completely shaken. While soaring beneath the moonlit sky, Rose explained that being restricted to a specific type of lineage magic could often feel more like a curse than a gift. Rose clarified the situation, explaining that Hermes did not possess any lineage magic. Far from being cursed, he discovered he could manifest any magic imaginable, granting him limitless potential. Rose describes Hermes as the world's most liberated mage, possessing the potential to develop magic even more remarkable than her own. She confirms that she has been searching for someone exactly like him, which finally allows Hermes to start believing in his own potential. Beneath the glow of the full moon, Rose extends her hand to Hermes and offers to take him on as her disciple, signaling a major turning point in the boy's life. Hermes acknowledged that Rose's proposal was logically suspicious, but seeing her genuine passion convinced him that she shared the same deep love for magic that he did. Hermes was deeply moved by Rose's words, finding her genuine faith in his potential more convincing than anything else. He accepted the invitation, noting his enthusiasm for the chance to work alongside her. 5 years after his meeting with Rose, a more mature Hermes is seen sprinting through the city streets with unwavering determination. From that point forward, she devoted herself entirely to her education and her responsibilities as a noble. Driven by a lingering sense of guilt, she sought to atone through relentless effort and discipline, never allowing herself to forget what had transpired. Refusing to entertain any debate, the arrogant ruler asserted that their nation is governed strictly by inherited magic, and because his power is unmatched, he considers himself the ultimate authority. Faced with concerns about the nation's future, he dismisses the individual entirely, telling them to blame their own lackluster magic before ending the exchange with cold contempt. Katya is soon discovered by a unit of soldiers under the command of a man named Chris. Addressing her formally as Lady Katya von Trachia, he orders her to cease her resistance. Though visibly startled by his arrival, she maintains a look of steady resolve. Chris levels an accusation of treason against Katya, but she holds her ground, arguing that he is overstepping his authority by attempting to arrest a duke's daughter without any proof or formal charges. Chris conceded that he didn't actually have any formal grounds to accuse Katya. He discloses that he is acting under the second Prince Aster's orders, asserting that the prince's word defines justice, though Katya immediately senses he is bluffing. Katya understood that allowing herself to be imprisoned now would be seen as a silent admission of guilt. Despite her suspicion that Chris is bluffing, she realizes that in noble circles, a rumor can easily become reality. 5 years in this environment have taught her that appearances often outweigh the truth. Determined not to surrender, Katya readies her magic to confront Chris, who merely mocks her defiance as the predictable behavior of a cornered criminal. He threatens to leverage her father's influence to have her imprisoned, but she remains undeterred and orders him to retreat. Infuriated, Katya lashed out at Chris, berating him for his own rudeness and his father's overwhelming arrogance. With unwavering resolve, she continues to pray for peace amidst the chaos, channeling her magic to save a world she cannot see while the dawn remains out of reach. Enveloped in a whirlwind of intense energy, Katya unleashed the power of her lineage magic, Sotaria Trivia. The enemy watched in disbelief, caught off guard by the realization that she also wielded lineage magic. The opponent retaliated, unleashing his own lineage magic against Miss Deltina. A violent surge of energy erupted across the field, leaving a trail of massive destruction in its wake. Rose was caught off guard by the sheer intensity of the enemy's relentless assault. Her attempt to counterattack faltered when she realized her magic was failing to flow correctly. Though she was far from her peak condition, she compelled her body to continue. She remained resolute in her decision to face the threat, regardless of the danger it posed. The enemy mocked Rose's ineffective assault, suffering almost no damage before preparing his final spell. Claiming he had the king's permission to cause total destruction, he arrogantly unleashed his magic to finish her off. While Rose was left weakened on the ground, she managed to remain conscious. As Rose lay weakened on the ground, she recalled a childhood memory of Hermes being the only person to ever sincerely praise her magic. While his words had often been her source of comfort, she still regrets her inability to protect him in the past, as the memories of the discrimination they faced together as children ignite a newfound resolve within her. Rose believed it was foolish to dwell on an unchangeable past, yet as she faced defeat, her only wish was for Hermes, the boy who once held her hand with hope, to come and save her. At the final second, Hermes intervened by shielding Rose with a powerful magical barrier, successfully repelling the incoming strike. His resolute expression made it clear he had been waiting for this exact opportunity to finally repay her for everything she had done for him in the past. Appearing beside Rose with a composed smile, Hermes admitted he didn't quite grasp the situation, though it was clear she was in a difficult spot. Startled by the voice, Rose turned around and immediately recognized Hermes, who now appeared far more mature and self-assured as he respectfully greeted her as Kari-sama after years of absence. The moment Katya sees Hermes, she is visibly shaken by instant recognition as memories of their childhood begin to resurface. She recalls the smiles they shared under the tree and the unwavering support he offered her in the past. Deeply moved by these memories and his sudden presence, she softly utters his name. With total confidence, Hermes introduces himself to Katya and explains that he has fulfilled his promise to return as a powerful mage. His steady, composed expression made it clear that he had finally honored the promise he made as a child. Returning to the royal capital from which he was once banished, the boy soon encounters familiar faces from his past, including his brother and a woman named Katya. Facing them with a steady gaze, he remarked on how much time had passed since their last encounter. A flashback reveals the moment the girl first met her master, juxtaposed against her memories of cruelty and lethal orders, an encounter that shifted the entire course of her life. Startled awake and still disoriented, the boy fearfully drew back the curtains. Scanning the unfamiliar room, he struggled to get his bearings, eventually sitting on the bed as he took in the surprisingly lavish decor. Hermes was left utterly speechless to find the woman resting right beside him, wearing a serene smile as she offered a morning greeting. As the events of the previous night suddenly rushed back to him, he was left feeling deeply embarrassed and struggling to make sense of the situation. Hermes struggled to piece together how he had ended up waking up in the same bed as the woman. She explained that he had fallen asleep from exhaustion during their journey, so she brought him home to let him rest by her side rather than waking him, while he recalls his new role as her apprentice. Overcome with embarrassment, Hermes offered both his thanks and an apology after learning she had personally cleaned him and changed his clothes. With a gentle smile, she reassures him that she is actually the one who should be grateful, admitting she had missed the warmth of human contact and truly enjoyed the comfort of having him sleep by her side. The woman suggests that Hermes get more rest or even stay in bed with her, but he shyly declines, leading her to offer a tour of the house before breakfast instead. When she extends her hand, Hermes hesitates for a moment before finally taking it. The two of them stepped out of the room together, officially beginning their new life under the same roof. While touring the home, she informs Hermes that he has free reign of the premises, excluding the laboratory, and cautions him to avoid any reckless behavior until he's fully adjusted. Observing the scene in silence, Hermes felt as though he were in a dream, finding the calm and inviting atmosphere to be a complete departure from the harsh reality he once knew. Hermes questioned if he truly deserved such kindness as the woman explained that, since he was staying there, he would need a room of his own. Despite his hesitation, she cheerfully insisted he stay, explaining that her home had more than enough space for him to have a room of his own. Hermes was stunned to find his assigned room in a state of total disarray, resembling a neglected storage unit, while the woman realized with some confusion that the place hadn't been tidied in over a decade. Ernie humbly accepts the arrangement, expressing his gratitude for the space, while she quickly changes the subject to breakfast to hide her embarrassment. After discovering a plate of burnt food, Hermes asks for an explanation, prompting the woman to admit in frustration that she hasn't cooked in 10 years and usually relies on pre-made meals. Despite the unappetizing state of the food, Hermes remains polite and reassures her that it's perfectly fine. To him, any warm meal was a welcome luxury compared to his previous diet. Hermes privately noted her struggle with domestic chores despite her efforts, yet he maintained a grateful front while facing the bizarre meal before finally asking to be taught magic. Clearly thrilled by the turn of events, She agreed with a smile and led him to a room filled with books to start his lessons. While Hermes found himself impressed by the collection of magical tomes, the woman apologized, feeling she had yet to earn his full trust. She admitted that her efforts to look after him and cook were meant to improve his impression of her, yet she felt she had failed on every front. Hermes is surprised to realize her efforts were genuine. He explains that his suspicion was a natural response to being led to an unfamiliar place by a stranger. The woman is understanding and even feels relieved by his cautious nature. Taking his hands with genuine warmth, she expressed that he was a miracle to her, someone far too precious to ever take for granted. The woman assured Hermes that she would remain loyal to him as long as his pursuit of magic was genuine, vowing never to abandon him even if he struggled to succeed. Moved by her reassurance, Hermes admits his fear, but her vow to guide him as long as he moves forward allows him to finally open up. Hermes reflected on the traumatic day his magic was discovered, an event that transformed his life into a nightmare where he was branded an abomination and cast aside, leaving him with a deep-seated fear of being abandoned once more. Holding back his tears, he apologized for his earlier doubts and thanked her for saving his life, as he finally felt his hope in magic return. Hermes offered a sincere smile and asked her to look after him from then on, proudly addressing her as his master, and leaving her deeply moved by his words. Overwhelmed with emotion, she pulls him into a tight embrace and names him her greatest disciple, officially cementing their bond as master and student. As Hermes focuses on his studies, his master explains that his entire magical education has been building toward one ultimate objective. Her goal was for him to master the most potent magic she had ever devised, a technique she considered her ultimate masterpiece, which only Hermes possessed the potential to truly perfect. Despite knowing his goals may take a long time to reach, Hermes watches as his master stands before a massive magic circle, declaring the start of a grueling training period that would soon mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Hermes bid his master farewell, resolutely promising that he would return to the royal capital. Seeking to honor his lessons and reclaim what he once lost, he vows to move forward without regret, while his master watches in silent appreciation of his resolve. With a determined smile, Hermes explained that he needed to explore various types of magic in the capital to find his own specialty, before finally revealing his true objective. As the reality of Hermes' departure sets in, his master breaks down in tears, overwhelmed by the thought of being separated from him. Clinging to him, she confessed her inability to cook, clean, or survive on her own, while Hermes watched with a subtle smile, already envisioning the chaos she would encounter in his absence. Now 15 and noticeably more mature, Hermes asks his master to stop the constant hugging, signaling that it's time for him to move on. She sadly agrees, realizing that the moment for her disciple to begin his own journey has finally arrived. With a look of affection, she explained that her teachings were merely the foundation, and it was now up to him to decide how his magic would ultimately take shape in the world. The master delivers a stern warning about the royal capital, describing it as a cynical place filled with lazy, malicious people who lack independent thought, and cautions Hermes that he will inevitably witness things he'll wish he hadn't. Despite her asking if he still intends to leave, she already knows his answer. Hermes remains resolute, firmly stating his decision to move forward on his own path. He explains that while he truly enjoyed his life with his master, he now has an important purpose to fulfill in the capital. Driven by a desire to eventually stand on her level, he realizes he can no longer stay behind if he hopes to reach those same heights. He sought her unwavering trust in his path, even if it meant she had to look past the truth. Hermes stood firm in his resolve to depart, confident that he could achieve great things, though he lightheartedly remarked that he would only return if he were starving, lonely, or facing his end. Flashing a confident smile, his master encouraged him to head to the capital to showcase his newfound power and prove his worth to everyone who had once doubted him. Wearing a determined smile, Ernie set off for his next destination while his master watched from the field, waving and calling out to him with immense pride and affection. Gazing up at the sky, the master spoke with deep conviction, insisting that Hermes reclaim every one of his lost desires. Upon returning to the capital, Hermes crosses paths with a significant figure from his past. Armed with newfound strength and confidence, he finally feels ready to return the favor from his past, turning this reunion into the start of a long overdue chapter. With a look of unwavering resolve, Hermes vows to finally be the one who protects her. Now that he's grown stronger, he intends to use his magic for her sake, marking the official start of his true mission. After a long separation, Hermes finally reunited with Katya, who was visibly stunned to recognize him. Approaching calmly, he explained that he chose to intervene simply because she appeared to be in trouble, making it clear that despite not knowing the full situation, He couldn't bring himself to ignore her. Hermes steps forward to identify himself to the group, though his brother only met his gaze with a look of clear disdain. Visibly unsettled to see him alive, the brother made no effort to hide his discomfort as he recalled Hermes being banished from the family 5 years ago. Dismissing him as a failure, he arrogantly ordered him to hand over the girl at his side. Hermes' brother confronted him in a rage, asserting that he had no right to interfere as a commoner without magical lineage. But Hermes remained composed and asked for the reasoning behind the girl's accusation. She quickly rose to her own defense, asserting that she had done nothing to damage the Duke's reputation. Regardless, his brother insisted that Hermes stay out of the situation, reminding him that he no longer held his noble status. Hermes reminded Katya of her support during his imprisonment, confessing that her presence was the only thing that kept his spirit from breaking, and that he now intended to repay her kindness. Casting a sharp glance, he pointed out that there were numerous ways to help her, including getting rid of the troublesome noble, which left his brother visibly annoyed. Touched by Hermes' words, Katya tells him it's unfair for him to show up and make her want to rely on him, prompting a warm smile from him in return. Fueled by rage, the brother unleashed a powerful spell, condemning Hermes for his arrogance after the suggestion to cast him aside. Hermes' brother unleashes a potent magical ability, fueled by an array of sacred symbols and ancient titles. Hermes identified the spell instantly, as it was a technique he had encountered many times throughout his past. With a self-assured smile, he remarked that he was pleased to have this be the first spell he witnessed since his return to the capital. Hermes decides to showcase his own magic, and as he begins the invocation, intricate symbols and energy swirl around him. He chants a spell centered on truth and creation, leaving the onlookers stunned as Katya realizes his power is anything but ordinary. Hermes clarifies that his magic isn't a product of noble blood or divine favor. Instead, he reveals that his strength comes from his master's guidance and the relentless effort he put into his own training. This power stands as living proof of the growth he achieved through his own merit. Unveiling his creation magic, Hermes summons the Stele of Origin, a radiant and complex structure that serves as the physical manifestation of his own tireless efforts, independent of any inheritance or divine aid. Overcome by rage and denial, Hermes' brother screamed that such superior magic was impossible, dismissing the technique as a third-rate creation while Hermes firmly confronted him. Attempting to justify his actions, the noble claimed his only goal was to capture Katya, yet he was clearly shaken to realize that the brother he once looked down upon had now far surpassed his expectations. In the heat of the confrontation, the enemy shouted that no one would spare a thought for a commoner caught in the middle of the chaos. Remaining composed, Hermes steadily channeled his spell as Katya observed in silence, fully acknowledging his prowess. She explained that Stele of the Origin was designed to analyze and reconstruct any form of magic, serving as the very foundation of all magical creation. Katya explains that magic is governed by rigid laws, only replicable through their fundamental structures. However, while her own hereditary magic limits her potential, Hermes faces no such restrictions. Unbound by the constraints of a specific lineage, he holds the unique potential to recreate any form of magic, a feat impossible for any typical mage. Meanwhile, his adversary is forced to confront a seemingly impossible situation. Hermes remains composed as he reflects on the complexity of his achievement. He had successfully replicated lineage magic right before everyone's eyes, a feat long considered impossible. This was only possible due to the vast knowledge and grueling training he had endured since childhood. It wasn't just a theoretical success. He had perfectly executed the magical recreation in the heat of a real battle. Overwhelmed by frustration, Hermes' brother lets out a desperate cry, unable to accept that he has been overtaken by someone he believed should have been erased from history. Maintaining a firm silence, Hermes focused his magic with precision, determined to let his power do the talking. Hermes unleashed his magic with calculated precision. The energy struck Chris directly, the force of the impact sending him flying. The nearby knights shouted his name in shock, unable to do anything to stop his fall. As Chris's allies scrambled to his aid in a panic, Hermes and Katya capitalize on the distraction to prepare their escape. Driven by fury and humiliation, Chris screamed for his soldiers to eliminate Yermi, sparking an immediate chase through the city streets. After finding safety in a secluded alley, Hermes took a moment to recover, struck by how much Katya's appearance had matured during their 5 years apart. Filled with raw emotion and anger, Katya lashes out with a barrage of questions and accusations, revealing the true extent of her long search for him. Collapsing before Hermes, Katya questioned why he had never truly trusted her, laying bare the pain and fear of loss she had carried alongside her regrets. Hermes remained silent, deeply affected by the weight of her confession. Offering a sincere apology, he holds Katya as she breaks down in tears, overcome with emotion. Tearfully, Katya thanked Hermes for making it back alive, offering her forgiveness with a smile of pure relief. Hermes responded by gently pressing his forehead against hers, apologizing for his past helplessness as they shared a quiet, heavy moment of reunion. Katya began questioning Hermes, eager to learn what his life had been like over the past 5 years. They were eager to find out where he lived, his current lifestyle, and his plans for the future. Hermes's inability to give a straight answer catches her by surprise, leading him to sheepishly admit that while he has a few ideas, he hasn't made any final decisions yet. Excitedly, Katya invites Hermes to live in her home and offers to hire him on the spot. The sudden proposal caught Hermes completely off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless. Kneeling before the prince, a subordinate pleads for mercy after failing to capture Katya, only to receive a cold reprimand from the irritated royal for losing to an unknown mage despite having ample troops. Stung by the shame of his defeat, the prince decided to falsify his report, rather than admit he had been bested by an exile. Deeming Katya a rising threat to the nation, he orders an investigation into the mage who assisted her, and demands that her freedom be revoked. The prince watched his humiliated subordinate with a cold, disdainful gaze. To him, anyone who failed to understand their place required subjugation, a fate many others had already suffered. Without a hint of mercy, he discarded the man as nothing more than a common nuisance. Upon returning to the capital after leaving his master's residence, the boy discovered his childhood friend Katya was being falsely accused, prompting him to intervene and save her by channeling his lineage magic through the Estelle of the origin. Though her proposal caught him by surprise, he agreed to accompany Katya to the Tarcox family estate, where the two soon arrived together. Despite having visited before, he found himself struck by the sheer scale of the place, while a servant rushed over to greet the girl, relieved by her return yet visibly concerned about her long absence. Layla grew concerned upon seeing Katya's disheveled appearance and visible injuries. Katya offers her some reassurance, leading Layla to recognize Hermes as Katya's childhood friend, though she doesn't hesitate to mention his reputation for being expelled due to a lack of talent. Even so, she was visibly relieved to see that he was safe and sound. Katya welcomed Hermes into the Trochia residence, assuring him that her staff would treat him with much more respect than the servants of the Fenrir house. Relieved, Hermes accompanied the group to see Lord Jorgen, where Katya introduced him with proper formality. Lord Jorgen expressed his gratitude to Hermes for protecting Katya, clearly struck by how much he had grown. After learning Katya intends to hire him as a guard, he asks Hermes to showcase his magic once more, recalling how much his daughter admired his skills in the past. Hermes agrees and begins preparing for the demonstration. Hermes showcases his magic, leaving Lord Jorgen stunned as he admits he's never seen anything like it. When questioned about the technique's origin, Hermes avoids the truth and simply claims he was taught by a certain individual. Sensing the risk of exposure, Hermes' master observes from the shadows and instructs him to stop speaking, prompting Hermes to keep her identity a closely guarded secret. Despite the direct pressure from Duke Trochia, Hermes remained steadfast and refused to reveal any information regarding his master. Hermes clarifies that his choice isn't driven by fear or outside pressure, but by genuine loyalty and respect. He remains steadfast, refusing to betray his teacher's trust or compromise their identity. Intrigued by Hermes' abilities, the Duke questioned if he could replicate lineage magic, prompting Hermes to explain that his process isn't a mere copy, but a full reconstruction based on observation and theory. When questioned about the potential constraints of his magic, such as usage limits or the ability to swap spells, Hermes confirms that there are no limitations, as he can cast the recreated magic repeatedly while maintaining all previous instances without any constraints. Stunned by Hermes' boundless potential, the Duke realized that magic capable of replicating any spell without restriction could easily dismantle the entire hierarchy of noble society. He questioned Hermes regarding his ultimate goals and his reasons for returning to the capital with such newfound power. Furthermore, he expressed skepticism over the decision to save Katya, stating that he couldn't offer his full trust until these motives were clarified. The Duke remained skeptical of Hermes, suspecting that he was attempting to reintegrate himself with the nobility for his own hidden agenda. Opting for a direct approach, Hermes acknowledges that suspicion is only natural, yet he firmly maintains that his true goals have nothing to do with causing grief or seeking influence. He is searching for a unique power, a magic he can finally claim as his own. Standing his ground against the Duke, Hermes finally revealed the true extent of his ambitions. Hermes isn't interested in prestige or mending ties with the nobility. Instead, his sole ambition is to craft a form of magic that is uniquely his own. Rather than relying on inheritance, he wants his power to be the product of his own study and dedication. He reveals that his lifelong dream has been to master the fundamentals of magic creation, eventually developing a spell that belongs to him alone. Drawing inspiration from his master, he aimed to create something even more profound than inherited magic, a true testament to his own existence and hard work. Hermes admitted that he assisted Katya because she consistently prioritized others, even when facing her own hardships. Realizing she was still the same compassionate person who had supported him in the past, he felt a strong desire to return her kindness. The Duke criticized Hermes' reasoning as naive for being based on a fleeting impression, yet he admitted that, from a father's perspective, he could understand the sentiment. He felt a sense of pride seeing someone place so much confidence in his daughter. Ultimately, he expressed a sense of relief, reassured that Katya would be safe under Hermes' protection. Mortified by her father's comment, Katya scrambled to clarify that Hermes didn't harbor any romantic feelings for her. Secretly, she was thrilled that Hermes would now be her permanent protector, even as she struggled to mask her true feelings. Hermes expressed his gratitude to Katya for the warm reception, pleasantly surprised to find himself in a comfortable room after fully expecting to sleep outdoors. Reflecting on the situation, he realized Lord Jurgen would be forced to protest his brother's involvement since the order came directly from Prince Aster, though this would at least keep their enemies contained for the time being. Aware of the unpredictable dangers ahead, Hermes resolves to take his position as Katya's guard seriously. Right as she steps out onto the balcony, she reached out to him for a conversation, noting that recent events had left them with little time to catch up properly. Hermes complimented Katya on her beauty, leaving her visibly flustered and caught off guard by the sudden praise. Katya complains that he has become much more direct, leaving Hermes puzzled by her reaction as she reminisces about how timid his compliments used to be. Mindful of their new social standing, Hermes attempts to maintain a formal distance, but Katya insists he address her as he once did, arguing that as her attendant, he is obligated to follow her orders. Though still a bit puzzled, Hermes eventually relented and addressed her as Katya, leaving her feeling both embarrassed and satisfied. As they spoke under the night sky, Katya questioned Hermes about his master, though Hermes remained vague due to the man's high social standing, noting only that he had been considered a failure. Regardless, Hermes remained steadfast, asserting that his master is the world's premier magic user and will always be his personal number one. Hermes asked Katya how her life had been over the last 5 years, prompting her to reveal her engagement to Prince Aster. After Hermes confirmed the news in surprise, Katya noted that if she were truly a fiancé, even a childhood friend and servant like him wouldn't be permitted to stay with her so late at night. Katya reveals that her engagement to Prince Aster was dissolved just last month, and though she is now merely the daughter of a disgraced noble, she shares the news with a remarkably serene smile. After Hermes dressed in formal attire, Layla complimented his appearance and noted that Katya would surely be impressed. While heading down the stairs, Hermes noticed the residence was surprisingly empty of servants, especially around Katya's quarters, before Layla pulled him aside for a private conversation on his first day as a guard. When Hermes asks if Katya has any reliable friends in the capital, Layla clarifies that she is actually quite isolated, as her status as a duke's daughter means most people only approach her with ulterior motives. Layla then directly asked Hermes to serve as Katya's emotional support, requesting that he truly understand her heart and never abandon her. Reflecting on his 5 years away from the capital, Hermes realizes the hardships Katya faced as a duke's daughter, including her broken engagement, and vows to support her now more than ever, only to be surprised by her calling out to him excitedly just as he prepares to leave. Dressed in formal attire, Hermes arrived and apologized for his delay, leaving Katya so flustered by his appearance that she shielded her face and told him to stay back for a moment. As the girls attempt to console her by suggesting she was simply overwhelmed, Hermes remains puzzled, questioning if his outfit was truly that impressive. Donning his new uniform, Hermes formally introduces himself to Katya, reaffirming his dedication to serve and support her as both her attendant and lifelong friend. Kaju recalls the painful memory of her mother leaving when she was a child, remembering how she desperately chased after her, begging her not to go. Katya recalls her mother's warm smile and her final request never to forget her. Before her departure, Katya's mother shared a final profound lesson. Magic is meant to protect the weak rather than dominate them, and true happiness is found only by safeguarding the joy of others. Overcome with emotion, Katya chased after her, holding on to the final request to become a noble worthy of respect. Katya watched in despair as a devastating attack struck the city, desperately calling out for her mother amidst the chaos. Paralyzed by the surrounding flames and destruction, she reached out a trembling hand in a futile plea for the nightmare to stop, completely overwhelmed by pain and helplessness. Katya wakes up in a contemplative silence, her mind still weighed down by the memories of her past. Gazing at a family portrait, she offered her mother a tender morning greeting filled with longing, and just a few days later, Hermes officially began his duties as her guard, marking the start of a new chapter by her side. During a briefing, a soldier reported the discovery of a dungeon in the Hawaii mountains near a neighboring count's territory, noting that while monsters had raided a village, no lives were lost. As a new threat loomed, the Duke prepared to evacuate the civilians and confront the danger. But with his soldiers spread thin, a determined Katya stepped forward to handle the matter herself. Katya stood firm in her decision to head toward the attack site, asserting that her noble status and lineage magic gave her a responsibility to protect the people. Despite his initial reservations, the Duke eventually recognized her resolve and granted his approval, reminding her that she has always fought for the sake of others and must uphold the promise she made to her mother to become a noble worthy of respect. Accepting the task to protect Katya once more, Hermes was granted a squad of soldiers by the Duke, who urged him to prioritize safety and retreat if the mission became too dangerous. Meanwhile, Hermes reflected on Katya's mother, remembering her as a woman of great kindness and courage. He lost his life defending the city from a monster horde when they were both only 6, a sacrifice Katya still remembers with deep affection. As they walked alongside the soldiers, Katya questioned Hermes about his history with monsters, and he revealed that he had encountered them during his training. Katya laid out the gravity of the crisis, warning that the monsters were multiplying so rapidly that they would soon jeopardize humanity if left unchecked, marking them as the nation's most significant threat. Katya explains that the mysterious labyrinthine structures known as dungeons serve as primary hubs for monsters, warning that if the populations within them grow unchecked, they can become a catastrophic threat to the kingdom. One of the knights voiced a heated objection to Katya's decision, arguing that Hermes was far too young to be entrusted with such a perilous mission. He stresses the inherent dangers and heavy responsibilities of dungeon exploration, but Katya firm counters by explaining that her choice of Hermes was based strictly on his skills, rather than personal ties. Katya and Hermes are soon confronted by an arrogant nobleman who introduces himself as Count Eldridge. He provoked her by calling her a flawed young lady, but the situation grew even more tense when the hostile count arrived to question her presence. Recognizing the man's name, Hermes recalled that his own territory shared a border with Katya's land. Attempting to assert his dominance, Count Eldridge declared he would conquer the dungeon immediately and ordered Katya to depart. He continues to provoke her, claiming she should be moved by his willingness to shoulder her burdens, but Katya stands her ground by reminding him the area is under her duchy's jurisdiction as Hermes watches on, clearly irritated by the Count's arrogance. Losing his composure, Count Eldridge began lashing out at Katya with a barrage of insults. He harshly accuses her of trying to claim credit for the dungeon, insulting her as a magicless failure who was rejected by the prince. Hermes is clearly uneasy with the confrontation, while Katya listens intently, her serious expression betraying how shaken she truly is. Just as Eldridge begins boldly claiming to be the divine chosen one, a monster suddenly appears and catches him off guard with an attack. Without a moment's hesitation, Hermes swiftly defeated the creature in full view of the crowd. Maintaining his composure, he offered an ironic apology, claiming he only intervened because he feared for Eldridge's safety. With a calm and polite air, Hermes mocks Eldridge by asking what the consequences would have been if they had ignored the surprise attack, effectively exposing his incompetence for failing to even notice the monster's arrival. Infuriated by the humiliation, the Count erupted in a fit of rage, unable to accept being shamed by someone he dismissed as a mere servant. Hermes responds with light-hearted irony, claiming he only wanted to help despite his lack of training, and further provokes Eldridge by suggesting the Count should be moved to tears of gratitude. Seething with humiliation, Eldridge lashed out at his men and swore that he would never forget Hermes's face. The rest of the group looked on in disbelief, clearly taken aback by how Hermes had managed the situation. Hermes offered an apology, admitting that he had let his excitement get the better of him. Visibly moved, the guard admits he misjudged him based on appearances alone, praising the courage it took to stand up to account for his master's sake while Katya watches their reconciliation with relief. The soldiers rallied with newfound resolve, pushing forward with the mission as a more unified force. Hermes moved swiftly, using his precise magic to take down several monsters in an instant. He maintained absolute control over the situation, earning a confident smile and words of praise from Katya, who now fully trusted him as her guardian. Hermes explains that he utilizes general magic enhanced by a stele of the origin, allowing for silent casting without incantations. While it may not match the raw strength of lineage magic, its sheer convenience and efficiency leave everyone in awe. The soldiers credited their smooth advancement through the dungeon to Hermes' support, but as Katya and the guards pressed onward, an unexpected sight brought them to a sudden halt. The party finds themselves facing a massive and intimidating beast that radiates an overwhelming magical presence. Hermes quickly identifies the overwhelming energy as the dungeon boss, causing the atmosphere to shift as the group readies themselves for the final battle. Identifying the creature as a dragon turtle, also known as the Black Tortoise, Hermes explains that it is a genuine dragon despite its appearance, noting that he previously encountered similar beasts during his training. Worried about Count Eldridge's predicament, Hermes suggested a tactical retreat to regroup and coordinate their next move with the Justice Minister's support. The dragon turtle's powerful roar echoes through the air, cutting off any chance of retreat and forcing Hermes and Katya to brace themselves for the creature's sudden aggression. The dragon turtle slammed into the ground with immense force, causing the entire structure to tremble violently. Hermes shields Katya as the ground gives way beneath them, while the soldiers scramble to escape the rapidly spreading destruction. Fortunately, the group survived after a protective barrier was conjured just in the nick of time. After confirming Katya was safe, Hermes somberly noted that their exit had been destroyed, leaving them with no choice but to face the dungeon boss. Roaring with fury, the tortoise dragon slams into the group's barrier, scattering debris in every direction. Hermes steps forward to shield Katya and the soldiers, bracing for a direct confrontation as the chapter concludes at the height of tension, signaling the start of a decisive battle. Despite its massive frame, the tortoise dragon lunged forward with unexpected speed. The beast swung its massive paw at the knights, tossing one soldier aside while the captain barely managed to block the strike. Feeling the sheer weight of the impact, he realized this battle would be far more grueling than he had anticipated. Hermes channeled his power with expert precision, landing several direct hits on the tortoise dragon. The force of the combined explosions soon took its toll, causing the beast's thick shell to splinter. Noticing that standard attacks are proving ineffective, Hermes instructs Katya to employ her lineage magic. Sensing a brief opening as the dragon pulls back, Katya raises her hand to invoke the ancient magic of Sotria Trivia. As energy surges around her, it becomes clear that she is finally ready to unleash their full power. The tortoise dragon surged forward with unexpected speed, successfully dodging Katya's strike. Struck by the creature's remarkable agility, she is momentarily caught off guard until Hermes steps to her side and offers his hand, signaling his intent to fight alongside her. With calculated precision, Hermes weaves his magic to activate the blood chain spell. They bind the tortoise dragon with magical chains before it can strike, leaving the creature suspended and unable to move. Katya watches in surprise, sensing the power and seamless coordination they share in the heat of battle. Despite being restrained by Hermes' chains, the tortoise dragon unleashed a surge of raw energy that shattered its bindings. As the soldiers watched in disbelief, Katya and Hermes realized the beast was far from exhausted, leaving Katya frustrated by their failure to gauge the enemy's true strength. Watching closely, Hermes saw the dragon manifest a powerful magical barrier that easily deflected the previous assault. As the creature released an aura similar to lineage magic, Hermes was struck by a familiar sensation from a dangerous moment in his past, making him realize their opponent was far more powerful than they had first believed. Hermes recalls a battle against a powerful dragon from a year ago, vividly remembering the intensity of its attacks and the desperate struggle for survival. Sensing a familiar magical energy, Hermes is immediately on high alert as he realizes this enemy shares the same signature as a previous foe. He remembers that, like the red dragon he faced with his master, this creature is immune to conventional spells. Drawing on his past dungeon experiences, he knows a standard attack won't work, and begins formulating a strategy that relies on more than just raw magical power. Meanwhile, the knights struggled to keep Katya out of harm's way. One of them shouted for her to escape with Hermes and bring back reinforcements. Katya adamantly refused to retreat, choosing to stand by her comrades on the battlefield despite the mounting danger. Katya hesitated, deeply conflicted by the prospect of leaving her comrades behind, paralyzed by the weight of their sacrifice and the agonizing fear of loss. She wavers in uncertainty until her mother's memory appears, providing the clarity and strength needed to make her choice. Gripping Katya tightly, Hermes urgently called out her name. He discloses that only a single attack can pierce the dragon's barrier, but it requires significant time to charge and chant the incantation. With the threat closing in, both realize that successfully executing this technique will be the turning point of the entire battle. Hermes grew serious, requesting just 5 seconds to keep the dragon pinned so he could deliver a decisive strike that would turn the tide of the battle. Hermes breaks into a sprint, focusing his magical energy to manifest a magic circle through his hand. Alerted by the movement, the dragon immediately lunges forward to strike. Hermes nimbly evades the strike, maintaining his concentration as he readies a final decisive spell. Hermes lunges forward with startling speed, weaving through the dragon's strikes, while reinforcing his physical form with magic. The watching knights are left impressed, noting that his seamless blend of agility and mana allows him to keep pace with even the most seasoned veterans on the battlefield. Just as the dragon attempted to strike Hermes during his charge, one of the knights stepped in to intervene. He stepped in to intercept the blow with his sword, firmly declaring that he wouldn't allow it. This creates a vital opening for Hermes to advance safely. Thanks to the knight's defense, the party successfully weakens the dragon, forcing it to its knees. As the beast roars in agony, Katya seizes the opportunity to prepare her finishing move. Katya unleashes her remaining magic to restrain the dragon, even as she realizes her power has reached its absolute limit. Despite the strain, she holds her ground and successfully suppresses the beast, buying just enough time for the final attack. Hermes commended Katya, acknowledging that she had successfully bought them the time they needed. As his magic reached full capacity, he unleashed a potent fire spell intended to strike through the dragon's defenses. Hermes finalized his spell with flawless precision. By unleashing the devastating technique known as alternate dragon breath, he conjured a sea of flames that completely engulfed the enemy dragon with power rivaling that of a true dragon. Hermes' attack strikes the dragon head-on, forcing a pained shriek from the creature as the flames take hold. The blast's intense power shatters its magical defenses, leaving its body to be completely swallowed by the inferno. The overwhelming force of the recreated magic proved impossible to withstand. The group kept a close eye on the dragon's fallen body, remaining cautious despite its lack of movement. Hermes silently analyzed the situation while one of the knights celebrated their perceived victory. But Katya was struck by the unique and intriguing nature of the magic Hermes had just displayed. Hermes clarified that the magic he used was actually replicated from a dragon found in a different dungeon. Utilizing the power of the Isle of Origin, Hermes mastered a technique that replicates any magic, including high-level monster abilities that even surpass lineage spells. Katya is genuinely impressed by his growth and praises him for becoming an incredible mage, though she chooses to hide her true feelings when he checks to see if she's been injured. Clearly shaken, Katya vented her frustrations, admitting that she felt completely useless. Despite possessing a formidable lineage magic renowned for its dragon-slaying power, she found herself unable to contribute as much as she had anticipated. Drawing a parallel between herself and Hermes, she lamented her reputation as a defective young lady who lacked the ability to use magic. Katya continued to wallow in guilt, certain that her inability to tap into her full power had put everyone at risk. Expecting Hermes to be disappointed, she was surprised when he gently took her hand and called her name, reaffirming his unwavering respect for her. Hermes questioned Katya about whether she had ever felt disappointed in him during the days when he was widely dismissed as talentless. Recalling the scars left by those who mistreated him, he firmly assures her that he isn't disappointed, echoing her own previous words back to her as a sign of his complete trust. Overwhelmed with emotion, Katya reflected on her past skepticism and realized she had been completely wrong about his potential to become a great mage. Hermes notes that someone as dedicated as Katya is destined to become a great mage, yet he senses an underlying obstacle holding her magic back. To help her overcome this, he offers to replicate her spell, treachery, using his own power. He maintains full confidence in her potential and hopes this demonstration will reveal exactly what has been limiting her abilities. The boy explained the process of recreating the treachery spell, demonstrating that success required a profound understanding of the magic's original form and style. As she observed him, she considered the inherent flaws of lineage magic, noting that its complexity often causes even those born with the gift to overlook certain details. He explains that mages with inherited magic use it instinctively, similar to how a person moves their body without understanding its anatomy. This lack of technical knowledge often leaves them blind to hidden flaws or errors within their spells. Suspecting this is the root of her struggles, he promises to investigate the cause of her difficulties himself. Count Eldridge arrived to find the two youths standing over the defeated dungeon boss. Realizing that this development would make his own task much easier. Ignoring everyone else, the Count began ascending the stairs alongside his soldiers. Though the girl tried to intervene in her surprise, he dismissed her protests and pressed onward. After discovering a legendary artifact within the dungeon, Count Eldridge was thrilled, already imagining the vast wealth, land, and higher noble rank he would secure by presenting it to the royal family. The girl confronted Count Eldridge directly, accusing him of attempting to seize the credit for conquering the dungeon and defeating its boss. Enraged, the Count asserted that the victory should have been his, accusing her group of stealing the credit, while the two youths watched with growing frustration and suspicion. Insisting that the dragon's carcass was undeniable proof of who truly defeated the boss, she demanded that Count Eldridge stop his attempts to manipulate the situation. With a malicious smile, the Count planned to erase all evidence, including the monster's remains, confident that the secluded mountain terrain would leave no witnesses to his deeds. Activating his lineage magic, Iolos, Count Eldridge summoned a massive magic circle behind him, drawing upon the south, north, and divine winds to prepare a catastrophic attack. With an air of arrogance, the Count unleashed the power of his lineage magic. He taunted the girl, claiming that her defects would prevent her from ever breaking his enchantment. He maintains that magical prowess is the ultimate authority in this land, openly despising anyone he considers weak. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the boy and girl begin to prepare for the coming confrontation. The Count issued a challenge, stating that he would only concede and retreat if her magic truly surpassed his own. Though Katya was frustrated, she acknowledged his formidable power and realized she would need a strategy to overcome it. At that moment, the boy stepped in to offer her advice on how to handle the situation. He explained that magic is heavily influenced by a person's feelings, suggesting that Katya's struggles likely stem from her own emotional confusion. He explains that the true power of a spell comes from the sincerity of one's feelings, which provides the necessary emotional weight. He notes that many people struggle to truly grasp their own emotions, a disconnect that ultimately hampers their magical performance. Katya pauses to reflect on the real motivation behind her magic. Though she initially believed she was simply reacting to the Count's provocations or ending his tyranny, she realizes her true drive stems from a deep-seated desire to uphold the justice expected of a noble. Katya realized she had been suppressing her true emotions to maintain her image as a perfect noble, only now understanding that she had spent her life merely living up to the expectations of others. Confronted by the reality of the situation, she finally came to understand the true feelings she had been harboring. Overwhelmed by her genuine emotions, Katya unleashed a powerful surge of magical energy. Outraged that the Count would steal credit for a struggle he never faced, her resolve hardened as she vowed to no longer tolerate such blatant disrespect. Katya finally awakens her lineage magic to its full potential, catching the Count off guard with her sudden surge of power. Eldridge is left bewildered, realizing the spell is unlike anything he has ever encountered. Katya confronts him with unwavering resolve, telling him directly that he should be ashamed of his actions. Katya unleashed the Soteria trivia spell, summoning a wave of armed skeletal warriors to charge the Count. Overwhelmed by the intensity of her awakened power, a terrified Eldridge could only retreat in a panic, unable to mount a defense. In an attempt to intimidate them, the Count dismisses Katya's magic as a mere facade, warning that her actions will only further tarnish her reputation. The boy countered with irony, reminding the Count of his own claim that no witnesses were present. Flashing a provocative smile, he suggested they eliminate all the evidence, turning the Count's earlier threat back on him. The boy taunts the Count, pointing out that if he were defeated by Katya's magic, the lingering mana would lead everyone to believe a monster was responsible. In response, Eldridge falls into a panic, frantically shouting orders to have the creature removed. Amidst the chaos, the boy remains composed, raising his hand to signal that he is now the one in control. One of Katya's allies quickly took down the Count's knights, viewing the skirmish as a much-needed outlet for his pent-up frustration. Overcome by panic, Eldridge collapsed to the ground and begged for mercy. With a steady, unwavering gaze, the boy made it clear that the final choice rested with the Count, who knew exactly what he needed to do to be spared. Cornered and without a way to escape, Count Eldridge finally surrendered, his face reflecting the heavy weight of his loss. He formally acknowledges their victory, declaring the artifact theirs by right as the boy and his companions watch the staff float before them, now officially in their possession. With the Count forced to retreat in disgrace, the group finally took a moment to celebrate their safety. Stunned by the scale of her own power, Katya asked the boy if he had assisted her, but he insisted the strength was entirely her own. This revelation left her visibly moved, as it marked the first time she had ever successfully cast such potent magic without help. The boy commended Katya, noting that her spellcasting had never been more beautiful than in that moment. Still stunned, she admits that her inherited noble magic feels incomplete, but he encourages her by asserting she hasn't reached her true limit yet, a fact he suspects she already senses. Katya questioned whether he might also be capable of awakening a power similar to her own. With a confident smile, he confirmed his belief and revealed a personal motive, admitting that he wanted to harness her incredible magic for himself. Deeply moved by his actions, Katya insisted he shouldn't hold back, feeling it was the very least she could do to repay him. A few days later, a peaceful quiet settled over the Duke's estate. As Katya savored her black tea and praised its rich flavor, the boy noted that he had frequently prepared this very blend for his former master. He accepted her compliment with quiet satisfaction, pleased that he had managed to suit her tastes perfectly. Hermes quickly won over the mansion's staff with his domestic expertise, performing his duties with the precision of a seasoned professional. Katya was so taken aback by his respectful offer to do whatever she requested that she accidentally choked on her tea, prompting the others to rush over in concern. Following the tea mishap, a servant attempted to defuse the tension, eventually pointing out that Katya's feelings for Hermes were plain to see. Katya retreats into denial, justifying her stance by citing their social divide and his likely perspective on their relationship, but her outward reaction betrays her true feelings. Katya struggled to navigate her own emotions, fearing that Hermes might view her as fickle following the sudden end of her engagement. Her attendants gathered around, doing their best to offer her some measure of comfort. Katya reflected on this change in Hermes, noting that his once cheerful innocence had been replaced by a distant maturity that made her unsure of how to approach him. Katya admits that despite feeling a bit selfish, she wishes Hermes would show more interest in her. Although he offered a compliment, his nonchalant delivery only left her feeling frustrated. The servant quickly picks up on her feelings, deducing that Katya longs to see a more shy and spontaneous side of Hermes, a realization she bashfully admits is true. Filled with excitement, the servant claims there is a definitive way to make Hermes express his emotions more openly. Katya found herself obligated to go on a date with him. The bluntness of the suggestion caught Katya completely off guard, leaving her stunned and unable to find her words. The chapter opens with a servant making a daring proposal to arrange a date between Katya and Hermes. She proposed a stroll through the capital to showcase Katya's charm, but as she eagerly began planning their day, a frantic Katya struggled to rein in her friend's enthusiasm. The servant noticed the dark circles under Katya's eyes and pointed out her clear exhaustion, reminding her that she hadn't rested since the dungeon conquest because she spent the entire night reviewing monster damage reports. Katya was stunned to learn that even her father, Lord Jurgen, had been genuinely concerned for her well-being. In a different wing of the mansion, he acknowledges that Katya has devoted herself entirely to her noble responsibilities ever since the passing of his wife. Katya was stunned to learn that her father felt guilty about her lack of freedom, as he believed she should be able to set aside her noble responsibilities and enjoy her youth like any other girl. Moved by his sincerity, Katya finally summoned the courage to ask Hermes out, eager to see where this new connection might lead. The following day, Katya and Hermes set out together for a leisurely stroll through the royal capital. Looking out over the city, Hermes is filled with nostalgia as he recalls his childhood. He expresses his gratitude to Katya for the invitation, admitting he'd already considered visiting, and his joy is evident. Meanwhile, a slightly embarrassed Katya reacts with shyness, still trying to get accustomed to the moment. As Katya prepared for her date, her servant offered reassurance regarding the breakup, noting that there was never any real affection between her and the prince, especially since he was the one who had originally proposed the union. Encouraged to be honest with herself and simply enjoy the moment, Katya is deeply moved, finally embracing her true feelings and finding the resolve to move forward. Katya recalled Hermes' teaching, reflecting on how the sincerity of one's feelings can bolster their magical strength. With a gentle smile and a look of resolve, she reached out her hand, finally accepting her feelings and finding the courage to express them. Pushing past her embarrassment, a determined Katya took Hermes' hand as they walked side by side. Taken aback by her actions, he asked for an explanation, leading her to quickly claim it was only to avoid getting separated in the crowded capital. Although she tried to play it cool despite her blushing, the gesture clearly betrayed her true feelings. Still clutching Hermes' hand, Katya enthusiastically led him through the capital. As she guides him through the city's markets and residential districts, Hermes follows along, surprised by both her infectious enthusiasm and the shifting dynamic between them. As he walked alongside Katya, Hermes found himself overcome by a deep sense of nostalgia. He fondly recalled how she would take him for walks whenever he became too immersed in his magical studies. The memory brings a smile to his face. But as they encounter familiar people, he and Katya awkwardly attempt to hide their intertwined hands. A group of merchants soon approached Katya and Hermes, publicly offering their thanks after recognizing her. It's said that before heading to the capital, Katya resolved a major crisis involving a fraudulent supplier, effectively saving the shop from financial ruin. Surprised by this revelation, Hermes realized that Katya had a positive influence on those around her without even trying. While she humbly dismissed her actions as a simple noble duty, the merchant argued that very few of her status would actually care about an ordinary shop like theirs. Moments later, she catches them holding hands and asks if they are on a secret date. Panicking, Katya tries to cover her tracks by claiming she's just showing the city to her new assistant, while the merchant watches the scene with a subtle chuckle. The merchant invited Katya and Hermes to her boutique, which specialized in high-end jewelry for the nobility. Despite feeling a bit out of place, Katya agreed to the visit. Hermes surprised Katya by admitting he knew little about jewelry, defying her expectation that all nobles were experts. In turn, she shared her own passion for fashion and dressing elegantly. Katya admits to Hermes that despite her love for fashion, she never found it worthwhile to dress up for others, sadly noting that her efforts never seemed to matter to her former fiancé. He would never truly acknowledge her, yet Hermes listened in silence, moved by the depth of her sincerity. Herm explains that his lifelong appreciation for beauty is what first drew him to magic, noting that he feels the same way about people. Herm admitted that he enjoyed seeing someone already beautiful become even more captivating. When he sincerely expressed his desire to see Katya wearing a jewel from the shop, she was caught off guard, blushing deeply out of embarrassment from his compliment. Sensing the romantic tension, the saleswoman playfully teases the pair before offering her best wishes for their future together. Clearly flustered and desperate, Katya suddenly stepped in to interrupt the entire situation. He quickly pulled Herm out of the shop, scrambling to explain that the situation wasn't what it appeared to be. As the night wore on, her frustration showed no signs of fading. Katya shouted in disbelief, clearly frustrated and embarrassed by the turn of events. Baffled by how Herm could say such embarrassing things so nonchalantly in public, she buried her face in her pillow, blushing as she replayed his comment about wanting to see her grow even more beautiful. Later, Layla informed her that a celebration was being planned in her honor to commemorate the artifact she had presented to the royal family. Katya asked for help selecting the perfect dress for the party, expressing her desire to look her absolute best. Layla was surprised when she suddenly showed concern for her appearance, a stark contrast to her usual self. And moved by this change, Layla agreed to help her. Katya then suggested visiting a shop where they could pick out matching accessories. As the celebration began, Hermes scanned the hall filled with prominent nobles, feeling struck by the sheer number of influential figures in attendance. Despite being handpicked for the task, he couldn't help but wonder if he was truly the right person to serve as Katya's companion for such an event. Katya made her appearance at the party, dressed in a sophisticated and elegant gown. Hermes was left completely awestruck by her beauty, as her presence commanded the room, and marked a significant turning point in their interaction. Clearly nervous, Katya shyly asks for his opinion on her dress, leaving Hermes momentarily speechless. Taking her hand, he struggles to find the perfect words before simply and sincerely telling her she looks incredibly beautiful. Caught between shock and embarrassment, Katya found herself unable to form a response. Throughout the event, Katya became the center of attention as guests praised her striking appearance, refined etiquette, and her notable growth in magic. As Eldridge's name began to circulate, word quickly spread that she had successfully driven him off using her lineage magic, leading Hermes to realize that she was now the center of everyone's attention. Lord Jurgen expressed his gratitude to Hermes for helping Katya overcome her struggles with magic. Hermes modestly replies that he only provided the opportunity, leading a satisfied Jurgen to reaffirm that his decision to trust him was the right one. Hermes questioned why Lord Jurgen placed such trust in him without any real guarantees, prompting Jurgen to explain that he suspected Hermes might have ties to the Fenribird house. Ultimately, his sincere trust in Katya was the deciding factor, a sentiment that Hermes also shared. Jurgen reveals he has a strong inkling regarding the identity of Hermes's master, claiming that such immense power could only have been granted by one specific individual, her. Jurgen reveals that his late wife shared a history with the mysterious woman, but he assures Hermes that he alone has connected her to the magic's true origin. Hermes was stunned to discover a potential connection between Katya's mother and the origins of his magic. Acting on Jurgen's advice to find Katya, Hermes walked away in silent contemplation, struck by how much the man had managed to deduce from their brief conversation alone. As he stepped forward, a butler announced his presence to Katya. Hermes comes across Katya as she is approached by Count Karl von Hartnett, a nobleman from the west who has arrived with a marriage proposal. Having heard that Katya successfully overcame her magical limitations, the Count refuses to accept her polite rejection and insists she meet his son, all while Hermes observes the interaction with a cautious eye. Katya clarified that her engagement to the second prince had been dissolved a month prior, prompting her to ask Count Hartnett to reconsider his proposal. Ignoring her request, the Count instead praised Katya's intellect and rebuked the prince for discarding someone so gifted, while Hermes silently looked on, growing frustrated by the man's persistence. The second prince suddenly cut in, halting the conversation with a menacing glare and an oppressive presence. The man demands to know what was said about him, clearly intending to confront anyone who spoke his name. Hermes immediately recognizes the imposing figure as the kingdom's second prince, Katya's former fiancé and the person responsible for his expulsion. Shock washes over Hermes' face as he remembers exactly who gave the order for his banishment. Hermes and the second prince stood before the hall's staircase, their eyes locked on one another. Amid the heavy tension, Hermes recognizes the prince as the one who orchestrated his expulsion. As the tension mounts, A newcomer named Sarah suddenly emerges at the prince's side. Caught by surprise, Katya recognizes her in an instant. The second prince's sudden appearance in the hall immediately commanded everyone's attention, leaving Hermes in shock as the guests began to whisper. Tension filled the air, as no one had anticipated seeing such an unexpected figure at the event. Hermes recognized Aster as Katya's former fiancé, the very person who had orchestrated her banishment years ago. While he questioned why he was attending a party for Katya's achievements, Katya stared Sarah down and took the initiative to speak, catching him by surprise and silencing him before he could utter a word. Second Prince Aster arrogantly dismisses Katya as worthless and confronts Count Hartnett for proposing to her, viewing the marriage as a direct insult to his royal authority. Visibly shaken, Hartnett attempted to justify his actions by claiming he was merely repeating rumors he had heard. Dismissing the excuses, Aster ordered everyone to leave the celebration held for his ex-fiancée before accusing Karl von Hartnett of treason, claiming his recent behavior signaled a clear intent to rebel. Aster publicly brands him a criminal, explaining that his presence at the party was actually intended to rectify this false perception. While the guards restrained him in full view of the crowd, Karl panics desperately pleaded for mercy, claiming the entire situation was simply a misunderstanding. Prince Aster ridiculed Katya's recent triumphs, suggesting that her newfound fame from overcoming her magical limitations and securing the rare artifact had clouded her judgment. Aster dismisses her achievements as fabrications and asks if she misses being his fiancée, authoritatively cutting her off before she can defend herself. Aster lashed out in a fit of rage, accusing Katya of twisting their conversations to suit her own agenda. Shutting down any further discussion, he publicly rejected her and declared that he would never marry her again. Katya delivers a firm and unmistakable rejection, leading Aster to imply he has already found someone else as he ends the encounter with cold indifference. Aster introduced his new fiancée, Sarah von Hartmann, the daughter of a noble, to everyone present. Sarah steps into Katya's former role with a cold and calculated expression, as Aster heaps praise on her beauty and talent, claiming she surpasses Katya despite her lower social standing. Katya is stunned to recognize Sarah from their school days, and their reunion quickly turns tense as details of their shared history begin to surface. Katya regarded Sarah as someone ill-equipped to handle the heavy expectations of being a royal fiancé. Katya confronts her, questioning if she truly has the resolve to handle the weight of the position, leaving Sarah stunned by her unwavering firmness. His master steps in with irritation, clearly intent on bringing the conversation to a close. Attempting to flip the script, Aster accused Katya of being jealous and cruel, claiming she had used her influence to intimidate Sarah during their school years. The sudden accusation caught everyone in attendance completely off guard. After hearing the prince's testimony, they began to harbor doubts about Katya. Aster stood his ground before the assembly, firmly maintaining that his claims were the truth. He continues to press Sarah, demanding she validate his accusations. Meanwhile, Katya came to the realization that their defensive efforts were ultimately proving futile. In that setting, no one would have the nerve to question the word of a prince. Buckling under the pressure, Sarah hesitantly confirms the prince's claims, though her doubt remains obvious. Aster seizes this opportunity to publicly denounce Katya, asserting that her true nature has finally been exposed as he begins to sway the audience's perception. He claimed that a woman labeled as defective could never awaken magic through legitimate means, suggesting that Katya had used deception. As the crowd began to doubt her achievements, Hermes observed how effortlessly everyone sided with the prince's accusations. Without warning, a massive creature emerged on the assembly hall grounds, catching the guests completely off guard. While a guard tries to restrain the beast, its overwhelming strength poses a lethal threat to everyone at the venue. Drawn by the chaos, Hermes and Katya rush to the scene, where they find a knight facing off against a massive, menacing wyvern. The monster's arrival intensifies the panic among the guests, leading Katya to order Hermes to prepare for battle against the looming wyvern. While the soldiers pull back from the danger, Prince Aster takes the opportunity to challenge Sarah to prove her worth. She put her magical abilities on full display for everyone to see. Kadir realized the monster's appearance was likely orchestrated, noting that Prince Aster's timely arrival and his eagerness to lead the defense felt far too convenient to be a coincidence. With the plan unfolding exactly as intended, Sarah readies herself to take action. With everyone watching, Sarah proceeded to activate her lineage magic. She invoked a powerful healing spell, casting a gentle light across the hall that instantly mended the wounded and left everyone in awe of her strength. Sarah maintained her focus, continuing to recite her magical incantation. She revealed a dual aptitude for lineage magic, and as the crowd watched in awe, she cast an even more potent spell that proved her strength far exceeded their expectations. The revelation caught even the prince off guard as Sarah finalized her spell, successfully sealing the wyvern within a formidable magical prison. Despite the creature's desperate thrashing, it remained securely contained. An unknown man soon arrives on the scene, offering praise for her recent accomplishment. Assuming responsibility for the remaining threats, the prince began chanting a high-level spell, surrounding himself with swirling flames and sacred sigils that manifested as an aura of celestial judgment. The prince unleashed his ultimate lineage technique, Ahura Mazda, saturating the entire area with an immense surge of energy. His arrogant smile and steady gaze made his certainty of victory clear, as he prepared to pass judgment on everyone with the absolute power he had just invoked. The prince delivered a final devastating blow of holy fire, reducing the monster to ash before coldly stating that it never stood a chance after crossing his path. The creature let out a final, agonizing shriek as the flames consumed it, eventually vanishing entirely. The sheer intensity of the power surge forces everyone to shield themselves as a massive shockwave ripples through the hall. The monster's charred body crashes to the ground in total defeat, smoke still drifting from its remains as the group watches in silence. A heavy atmosphere settles over the scene, leaving the guests visibly shaken by the overwhelming power they just witnessed. Amidst the public clamor, Prince Aster seizes the moment to boast of his power to the nation, before announcing his engagement to Sarah von Hartmann, whom he claims will be the pillar of his future reign. As the crowd erupts in cheers, praising Aster as if he were a national hero, Hermes watches the scene with a critical eye. He reflects on how, in this country, status is dictated entirely by the strength of one's inherited magic. To Hermes, it is clear that Aster's influence stems from raw power rather than justice, leading him to conclude that the nobility will always uphold this inherently unequal system. It was a clear reflection of their twisted society. Recalling his master's teachings about the decadent nobility who thrived on unearned wealth, Hermes finally grasped the truth. The capital, despite its outward prestige, was a place built on arrogance and a false sense of merit. He faced this reality with pure contempt, now fully aware of how corrupt the system truly was. As the crowd gathered, all eyes fell on Sarah as they marveled at her grace, hailing her as a legendary saint and the kingdom's savior. Caught off guard by the sudden flood of adoration and noble praise, she stood frozen, unsure of how to react. As the crowd erupts in celebration for Sarah, the newly appointed saint, Katya watches silently with a tense expression, clearly resentful of being overshadowed by the sudden praise. As the prince watched her in silence, he questioned why she wasn't acknowledging the cheering crowd, urging her to hold her head high with pride. Despite his words, Sarah remained still, her expression vacant and her eyes hidden from view. A sudden flash of light causes the prince to stiffen, sensing that something is wrong. His eyes widen as a cold chill runs down his spine, leaving him feeling deeply unsettled. The prince was suddenly struck by a cold shiver. He notices a young man watching him with a calm expression from a distance. Something about him felt strangely familiar, sparking a memory that left him both suspicious and uneasy. Demanding to know the stranger's identity and the reason for his stare, the prince is met with a blunt response. The young man is Hermes, a servant of Katya-sama, a name that clearly catches the prince off guard. Realizing Hermes hails from the Flambert family, the prince erupts in laughter, mocking him for being taken in by Katya and labeling him a useless joke. Despite the insults, Hermes maintains his composure, silently reflecting on the situation. Hermes recalled the prince's cold indifference during his exile, remembering how he had been tossed aside like worthless trash and treated as nothing more than a disposable object. Lashing out in a fit of rage, the prince accuses Hermes and Katya of conspiring out of resentment and selling their souls for power, citing Hermes' exile and the broken engagement as proof of their betrayal. He alleged that the monster attack was staged for fame, but Katya dismissed his claims as nonsense and shifted the blame onto him. Public sentiment shifted as the crowd turned on the prince, branding him a liar and making it clear that their trust in him had completely vanished. Infuriated, the prince ordered his guards to arrest Hermes and Katya, but Hermes stunned the room by stepping forward just as the soldiers began to close in. Before anyone could react, a firm voice called out for them to stop, prompting the prince to turn and recognize the figure with a quiet murmur. Jürgen von Trocchia, Katya's father, intervenes to put an immediate stop to the arrest order. He reminds the room that the law strictly prohibits making an arrest without a formal charge. In response, the prince accuses him of abusing his authority as Minister of Justice to once again shield his daughter from her crimes. Jürgen remains composed, firmly stating that the law is absolute and not open to interpretation. Jürgen maintains his impartiality by reminding the prince that he also recently authorized the release of another noble who had been taken into custody. Faced with the situation, the prince retreated, claiming he had lost interest and that they were simply lucky for the time being. Turning away, he ordered Sarah to follow him, and after a brief moment of hesitation, She complied. As the crowd's accusations of fraud against the prince and Sarah intensified, Katya restrained Hermes from intervening just as a new figure suddenly arrived on the scene. Observing the events with a composed smile, Hermes' older brother praised the dramatic display while questioning the depth of his planning, a remark that Hermes met with silence. Hermes contends that the prince manipulated the truth for his own benefit, slandering Katya with baseless accusations. He notes how the crowd remains silent despite the obvious inconsistencies in the story, a reaction he believes exposes a fundamental flaw within the kingdom itself. His brother coldly explained that the kingdom's success was rooted in its hierarchy, where those with superior magical lineage were destined to rule over others. Hermes' brother coldly remarks that the prince's authority is absolute, dismissing any opposition as weak, before warning Hermes that he will eventually see who the kingdom's true enemy really is. As night settled over the garden, Hermes fell silent, his expression growing stern as he tightened his fist. Reflecting on how easily the prince dispatched a wyvern, Hermes noted that while the magic was overwhelming, it lacked true mastery and relied solely on raw force. Later, he apologized to Katya for the trouble, but she was quick to reassure him. Hermes acknowledged that his current magic couldn't match the prince's sheer power, which relied entirely on the brute force of his royal bloodline. It bore a striking resemblance to what he had previously witnessed from Count Eldridge. Hermes explains to Katya that while he currently lacks the strength to best the prince, he possesses a unique power called primordial inscription, which grows infinitely stronger as he continues to utilize bloodline magics. Shifting his focus from raw power to a much larger ambition, Hermes vows to surpass Prince Aster and prove him wrong, while also acknowledging the unresolved conflict with his brother, who remains blindly loyal to the prince. Facing both opponents at once, Hermes stood ready, earning a grateful smile from Katya for his unwavering resolve. Confident in their partnership, she declared they would finally demonstrate the true extent of their power to everyone, a sentiment Hermes backed with a firm nod of agreement. In an effort to repair Katya's tarnished name, she and Hermes traveled the land, tackling high-level monster hunts and dangerous dungeons that other nobles avoided. They remained patient, trusting that their consistent, honest efforts would eventually win back the public's favor. After receiving a fresh plea for assistance, Hermes and Katya set off toward a secluded village. Upon their arrival, they noticed someone rushing past in a panic, signaling that an urgent situation awaits them. A pack of savage wolves suddenly closed in and launched an attack on a young girl. One of them knocks her to the ground while the others close in with menacing growls, leaving her to scream in absolute terror and helplessness. Katya intervenes at the last second, unleashing her bloodline magic, Underworld of Salvation, Sotera Trivia, to strike the wolves with a powerful blast and save the girl. The girl looked up in amazement, completely caught off guard by her sudden rescue. Katya draws near to ask if the girl is all right, and though clearly rattled, the child manages a nod. Her grandfather arrives soon after, overcome with emotion as he bowed low and thanked them for saving his granddaughter, struggling to find a way to repay such a massive debt. Hermes and Katya confirmed the reports were accurate, realizing that monsters had indeed reached the secluded village as Katya began to elaborate. A massive dungeon overflow has occurred. Once monsters multiply beyond a certain point, they swarm into the human world. A catastrophe that only happens when a dungeon is poorly managed. Katya notes that the dungeon's neglect likely caused the overflow and asks if the village had ever reported the issue. The village chief stepped forward to confirm the situation. 2 weeks ago, a villager stumbled upon what appeared to be a dungeon in the nearby forest. But despite their urgent pleas for help, Viscount Norcha failed to send any military support. With the village left completely vulnerable, the chief presented letters from Viscount Norcha revealing that every plea for assistance had been met with the same dismissive command to handle things themselves, leaving Katya visibly frustrated. She was stunned by his indifference toward the casualties, a reaction that Hermes quickly noticed before calling out to her. When Katya asks about Viscount Norcha's whereabouts, the village chief explains that he is likely at a newly established frontline base just outside the village, fueling her determination to find him. Deciding to face him head-on, Katya signaled for Hermes to follow as they began their trek through the forest. Hermes came to an abrupt halt, sensing an unfamiliar presence nearby. He scanned his surroundings cautiously, certain that he'd sensed a presence only moments before. Concealed within the nearby bushes, a mysterious figure silently monitors their every move. Upon arriving at the supply station, the group was stunned by the sight that awaited them. Left without weapons or provisions, they found themselves completely empty-handed. The girl looked around in shock, struggling to understand how their gear could vanish while the monster was still at large. As the gravity of the situation set in, the group realized that something was fundamentally wrong. Sensing a hidden presence, the blonde boy launched an explosive spell toward the bushes, exposing the man who had been secretly tailing them. After effortlessly capturing him, he offered a calm apology, explaining that he was well aware the man had been watching them for some time. The prisoner remains defiant, labeling them as heretics with contempt while the girl maintains a calm approach to her interrogation. Observing his defiant attitude, her expression shifted as she prepared to use force, while the blonde boy responded with a cold smile and a nod. Shortly after, the air echoed with the screams of the prisoners. Overwhelmed by fear, the prisoner confessed he was operating under Viscount Norcia's orders to sabotage Lady Katya, leaving her to deal with the monsters alone so he could eventually step in and claim all the credit. She was stunned to realize the entire situation was a calculated trap, specifically designed to ruin her reputation. Infuriated, the man blamed them for the situation, revealing that Viscount Norcia had been scouting for a bride for his son. After hearing rumors about the Trachea family's daughter, the Viscount had even attended a celebration to see her in person. The protagonists were blindsided to discover that Norcia had been involved from the very beginning, even as the villagers' lives remained in jeopardy. After carefully analyzing the situation, the boy reached a conclusion regarding the Viscount. Outraged by his failure to secure the marriage he wanted for his son, he deliberately triggered the Great Overflow to sabotage Katya's reputation. Livid, she confronts him for disregarding a noble's primary obligation to protect the common people. Without warning, a violent tremor shook the ground, instantly putting the trio on high alert. Before long, a horde of ogres, horned beasts, and giant wolves emerged, charging toward them with fierce roars. As a massive swarm of monsters begins its advance on the village, the girl steps forward with unwavering resolve. She accepts the impending battle and commands the captive to deliver a message to the Viscount, warning him that he will be her next target once the monsters are dealt with. Ignoring the boy's desperate pleas to stop, Katya continued her charge toward the monsters without a moment's hesitation. Charging into the fray, memories of her mother flood back, reminding her that while the woman lacked magical talent, her true strength came from a much deeper place. Katya steeled her resolve, drawing strength from the memory of her mother. During the Great Overflow, her mother had faced a massive horde of monsters alone. Despite her limited magical power, she refused to retreat, holding the line until reinforcements finally arrived. Ultimately, she sacrificed herself to ensure the safety of others, leaving Katya with a memory of her bravery that would never fade. Driven by her mother's final wish for her to become a distinguished noble, Katya held on to those words with unwavering resolve. Without a hint of fear, she stepped forward to meet the approaching horde of monsters head-on. Katya let out a visceral scream of fury and grief as a wave of dark energy erupted around her. Consumed by fury, she lashed out at the monsters, holding them accountable for the suffering and devastation they had caused. Katya then launched a fierce assault, cutting through the monsters one by one with unwavering determination. Driven by the need to protect others just as her mother once did, her resolve only strengthens as the intensity of the battle rises. Exhausted but unwavering, Katya continues her relentless assault, striking down monster after monster as she pushes forward against the overwhelming odds. Surrounded by the massive swarm, she tightened her grip, resolved to push forward regardless of the odds. Encircled by skeletal warriors emerging from the shadows, Katya's eyes blazed with a fierce resolve as her magic surged, signaling her intent to eliminate every last one of them without hesitation. Hermes catches Katya just as her strength finally gives out. Holding her close, he warns that she cannot continue pushing herself this way, as her own magic has begun to consume her. Trembling with exhaustion, Katya stares at him in disbelief as the gravity of his words begins to sink in. Hermes offers Katie a gentle reassurance, cutting through her fatigue with the reminder that he's right there by her side. Steeling his nerves, he stepped forward and began casting a spell, ready to join her in the fight. Hermes' voice remained steady and powerful as he began an ancient chant, leaving Katya stunned when she recognized the incantation. With the magic circle expanding behind them, Hermes finalized his devastating spell, Underworld of Salvation, Sotera Trivia, releasing a wave of energy that swept through the attacking monsters. Katya watched in amazement as her magic was recreated, while Hermes confirmed that he had only managed a surface-level imitation for now. Despite its appearance, the spell's power is comparable to noble-tier magic. As he reassures her that her own skills are still developing, a flustered Katya finds herself struck by just how far he has come. With a confident smile, Hermes reached out to Katya and assured her of their victory, reigniting her determination as she looked at him warmly. With a firm nod, she accepted his hand, resolved to face whatever challenges awaited them together. Viscount Norcia watched with an air of superiority, certain that Katya would soon be forced to beg for his assistance. In a fit of rage, he accused the girl of using forbidden magic to deceive them, demanding her execution for the kingdom's safety as his allies joined in, labeling her a dangerous fraud. Viscount Norsh proudly announced that Prince Aster would be sending reinforcements to handle the Great Overflow, expressing total confidence in Aster's future as king, and insisting that he would never let a disaster strike without a plan in place. Meanwhile, his subordinates whispered among themselves, suspecting he had planned the reinforcements' arrival all along just to watch Katya fail. The Viscount boldly proclaimed that the Treachery family's downfall was certain, and would earn him the prince's favor. But Katya suddenly appeared, offering a sarcastic apology for failing to meet his expectations. She firmly questioned what her victory would entail and who would be held accountable for abandoning her. Katya calmly confronts the Viscount, gesturing toward the battlefield covered in fallen monsters as he stands there, frozen in disbelief. Herm interjected, urging them to witness the truth firsthand before dismissing it, as clinging to their skepticism would only highlight their own ignorance. Confronting the Viscount with unwavering resolve, Katya made it clear that she had no intention of backing down. While others might hide behind excuses and neglect their duties, she vowed to continue proving her strength by protecting the kingdom and revealing her true character. With the monster defeated, peace finally returned to the village. Katya and Herm were met with heartfelt gratitude from the locals, while the Viscount withdrew, seething with humiliation. Their mission reached its end, leaving the village secure and the group with newfound respect as word spread that Katya had successfully suppressed the Great Overflow. News of her feat quickly spread among the nobility, sparking rumors of forbidden magic, while others, impressed by her skill, began calling for her status to be re-evaluated. Slowly but surely, the tide of public opinion began to turn in her favor. Meanwhile, Herm spent some time browsing the various stalls at the market. Spotting a young girl crying in pain, he moved to assist her, but his attention was immediately drawn to a hooded woman using magic to heal the injury. Stunned to find their injuries fully recovered, the girls eagerly questioned whether the hooded figure was actually a mage. She offered a smile in confirmation, though she requested that they keep the matter a secret. The girls thanked her with excitement, while the mysterious woman quietly took her leave. Rounding a corner, Herm accidentally collided with the hooded woman, leaving them both startled. Upon seeing her face, he immediately recognized her as the influential Sarah von Hartmann. Recognizing him immediately, Sarah's body stiffened as a look of unease crossed her face. She quietly notes that he is Katya's servant, and as memories of their history resurface, the rising tension confirms this is no ordinary meeting. Sarah nervously introduces herself as Prince Aster's fiancée, but she is quick to apologize and clarify that her title is purely symbolic, carrying no actual authority. Herm offered a calm assurance that he had no intention of hurting her, leaving her feeling both surprised and relieved. Feeling uneasy, Sarah questioned if Herm intended to use her as leverage against Prince Aster, but he calmly dismissed the notion, explaining that his group only wanted the prince to take responsibility for his mistakes. He mentions that Katya had been worried about her, catching Sarah by surprise, before Herm goes on to describe Katya as a humble and compassionate girl who never boasts about her strength. Reflecting on the past, Katya realized that Sarah's shock and gentle nature likely prevented her from standing up to the prince during that incident. She still hopes that Sarah won't hold on to any guilt, and hearing such kindness leaves Sarah completely overwhelmed as she breaks down in tears. Upon realizing that Katya had cared for her all along despite her previous doubts, Herm offered a sincere apology for the misunderstanding. He suggests finding a more private location to continue their conversation, leading them to a secluded spot beneath a tree. Sarah reflects on her time in school, explaining how she was initially ostracized by her peers due to her lower social status. Despite possessing 2 bloodline magics, she was shunned by everyone until Katya reached out with a kindness she would never forget. Herm empathized with Sarah's plight, realizing that the kingdom's political corruption was the driving force behind her separation from Katya. He reminds her that her betrayal of Katya is undeniable, yet acknowledges he understands her motives, emphasizing that the bond between the two women remains significant. He realized that even in such a corrupt world, individuals like her can still make an impact, leading Herm to reflect on the current state of the kingdom. Upon arriving in the capital, he quickly learned a bitter truth. The masses offer blind obedience to the powerful, viewing any hint of doubt or defiance as a grave mistake. He notes that Katya is a rare exception, a truly just noble in such a corrupt environment. Sarah admits she still holds Katya in high regard, admiring her unwavering commitment to her principles, while Herm acknowledges this with an understanding nod. He promised to relay those sincere emotions to Katya and, appreciating her openness, offered her some personal advice rooted in empathy and respect. Herm explains to Sarah that she is vastly underestimating the true strength of the human heart. She dismisses her own emotions as if they have no value, Yet when he gently points out her indifference toward her own well-being, the observation catches her by surprise and leaves her reflecting on his words. Herm explained that she needed to find a genuine emotion within herself. Something authentic that wasn't forced upon her but born from her own heart. Caught off guard, Sarah begins to reflect on the sensation, realizing it's a feeling that truly belongs to her. Herm suggested that trusting her intuition might lead to a better outcome than she expected, providing her with a newfound sense of hope. Herm tells Sarah he's certain she can become even more charming, a compliment that leaves her completely flustered and unsure how to respond. Sensing her reaction, he grew flustered and quickly apologized, clarifying that he hadn't intended for his words to sound like flirting. Flustered, Sarah manages to tell him it's all right as they both blush awkwardly, but she nervously stops Herm just as he's about to depart. Her heart racing, she asks how he would react if she followed her feelings, even if it meant opposing the group. But Herm simply offers a calm smile, noting that she already knows the answer. Offering a gentle smile, Herm tells Sarah that if they ever have to face one another, they will do so with honor, letting their magic be guided by their true emotions. He explains that the essence of magic is to give form to the heart's feelings, leaving Sarah moved and wondering how his words always managed to resonate so deeply within her. A few days later, rumors began circulating through the capital as the nobility whispered about the young lady of the Katya family. She had successfully conquered a dungeon that others found impossible, and her young servant was also being praised for his remarkable skills. One of them recognizes him with surprise, identifying the man as Hermes, a former child prodigy and ex-member of the Flimbreed family. Prince Aster received word of the young lady from the Katya family, whose recent achievements had made her the primary subject of conversation among the capital's nobility. As he listened to the report, he grew pensive and brought up the name of his servant, Hermes. The young prodigy showcased such overwhelming magical power that his opponent was forced to yield, leaving his instructors stunned by his mastery of advanced spells at only 5 years old. From an early age, everyone around him has been convinced that he is destined to become the kingdom's greatest mage. Prince Aster was widely celebrated for his intellect and natural skill, with many hailing him as both a genius and a literal divine blessing. He had always believed he was without equal, certain that frustration was a feeling he'd never know, until the day he met a particular individual. While on his journey, Aster noticed a fire burning in the distance. As he neared the site, he found the house already lost to the fire, and while a distraught man begged for help for his trapped daughter, Aster simply observed the tragedy in silence. Aster watched as a boy approached the river and began sketching a magic circle, leaving him skeptical since performing such a feat without lineage magic should be impossible. Yet something unexpected was about to happen. It seemed as though the boy was about to perform a feat that defied all reason. He then proceeded to lift the water directly from the river. He molded the energy into birds that soared over the inferno to extinguish the flames, leaving the onlookers stunned by his display of power. The water cascaded down like rain, saving both the house and the girl trapped inside. Overwhelmed with emotion, the father rushes to embrace young Hermes after his miraculous feat, while Aster watches in stunned silence, amazed by the boy's incredible ability. Later that night, Aster jolted awake in a cold sweat, gasping for air as the vivid memory of the fire resurfaced. Struck by the beauty and sheer power of Hermes' magic, Aster realized he had never seen anything like it. Despite being the same age, the gap between them fueled a deep frustration that pushed him to train harder than ever before. Exerting himself for the first time in his life, he fought to close the distance to Hermes, only to find that the gap between them widened despite his rigorous training. He contemplates acknowledging Hermes' superior talent but ultimately rejects the idea, unable to face the reality of the situation. Aster masks his inner turmoil with a facade of arrogance, and his attitude only sharpens when he learns that Hermes lacks any lineage magic. He forces a mocking laugh to mask the reality, knowing that accepting the truth would utterly destroy him, as he remains consumed by his own envy and pride. Declaring himself the kingdom's strongest and the true chosen of God, Aster refused to acknowledge anyone as his superior. He issued a formal command for the exile of Hermes von Flimbreed. Katya arrived at the grand mansion, her face set in a serious expression as she approached the entrance. As she drew closer, a hooded girl appeared and offered a respectful greeting, addressing her as Lady Katya. Approaching a blonde woman, Katie politely apologizes for the surprise visit, and asks if she has a moment to spare for a conversation. Under the soft glow of the moon, Katya and Sarah finally met. Sarah explained that although Prince Aster had granted her permission for the visit, he insisted she be accompanied. Sensing an intense magical aura nearby, Katya began to suspect that the mage traveling with Sarah was much more than a simple escort. Although Katya feared the meeting was a setup, Sarah's genuine remorse convinced her to stay and listen. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah offered a profound and tearful apology. Sirach's blunt honesty caught Katya completely off guard. During the celebration, Tara admitted to her harsh treatment of Katie and pleaded for her forgiveness. Remaining calm and composed, Katya offered her reassurance, explaining that Hermes had already told her everything and that she truly understood her feelings of regret. Sarah expresses deep regret for hiding her arranged marriage to the prince, but Katya reassures her with genuine understanding. Showing significant maturity, Katya admits she no longer values her status as the royal fiancé and recognizes that Sarah isn't acting out of selfish ambition. Katya looked Sarah directly in the eye, questioning if she truly desired to be the prince's betrothed. Setting aside any political concerns, she made it clear that her sole purpose for visiting was to hear Sarah's genuine feelings. Sarah was visibly torn by her emotions and struggled to find the right words, but the moment passed before she could manage a response. A sudden magical blast strikes a nearby tower, and Katya instantly senses the looming threat. Without hesitation, he began casting a defensive spell to shield them both. Katya watched helplessly as a sudden magical blast struck Sarah, leaving her severely wounded. Stunned, Katya struggled to react as she watched her friend suddenly collapse to the ground. He lay there, bleeding and completely unresponsive. Panicked, Katya rushed to Sarah's side, calling her name and begging her to stay strong, finally feeling a wave of relief upon realizing she was still breathing. Recognizing the severity of the injury, she realized that Sarah's life depended on her taking immediate action. Sensing a nearby presence, Katya recognized the specific magic behind the assault and narrowed her eyes at the culprit, the magic bullet archer. While rushing to Sarah's aid, Katya questioned why the assault had been directed at her friend instead of herself. Fearful onlookers gathered around the blood and the injured body, while a man claimed to have witnessed the entire event, drawing even more attention to the scene. A man steps forward and accuses Katya of using magic to attack Sarah and shove her off the platform. Stunned by the turn of events, she tried to defend herself by insisting the magic wasn't her own. She soon realized that the entire situation was actually an elaborate setup designed to frame her. The magic bullet archer stepped forward with a cold smile, accusing Katya of being dishonest. Asserting that the crowd witnessed the entire event, he accuses her of deliberately attacking Sarah under the guise of authority, using his order for her surrender to spring a trap designed to incriminate her. Infuriated, Katya threatened the archer and warned him to brace for the coming consequences. He laughed mockingly at the situation, explaining that his actions were entirely because of her, which finally exposed his deep hatred and calculated intent. The archer sneered at Katya, mocking her for acting like a hero now that she had mastered her lineage magic and slain monsters. After he names Prince Aster the kingdom's true hero, an outraged Katya confronts him, arguing that Aster's selfishness and pride will eventually lead to ruin. The archer retorts that the catastrophe she predicted never actually materialized. He asserts that the kingdom was unified under Prince Aster's leadership, claiming the recent disasters only occurred because of her. With a cold tone, he shifts the entire blame for the kingdom's instability onto her shoulders. The archer confronts Katya, accusing her of being the real source of the kingdom's troubles. He argued that her arrogance had put the entire group at risk, pointing to the injured Sarah as evidence that Katya's blind sense of justice was responsible for her suffering. Visibly shaken, Katya attempts to mount a defense, but her words carry no weight against his calculated manipulation. Katya stepped in to shield Sarah from the other students' mockery, sternly reprimanding them for their behavior. Feeling ashamed, Sarah apologizes and admits her constant dependence on Katya, lamenting that she can never seem to repay the kindness. Katya reassures Sarah that her kindness is a source of comfort for both of them, promising that their bond will remain unchanged. Offering a genuine smile, she promised that their friendship would endure regardless of what anyone else had to say. Deeply touched by the gesture, Sarah happily gave her consent. Staring at her blood-stained hands, Katya was consumed by guilt as she realized her actions had led to her friend's injury, convincing her that she alone was responsible for the chaos unfolding in the kingdom. Following Katya's apprehension, a pair of nobles met to deliberate on the recent events. One remains certain she was falsely accused, while the other deduces that Prince Aster and his allies had carefully orchestrated the entire setup. They grew concerned that clearing her name would be nearly impossible, especially since even the magical evidence might have been manipulated. Following Katya's arrest, Sarah was escorted to the palace under the guise of receiving medical care, though many suspected this was actually a move to eliminate any trace of magical evidence. Katya's allies began strategizing on how to clear her name, though they realized that gathering the necessary evidence and testimonies would be a lengthy process. She worried the prince might punish her before the full truth finally came to light. Driven by a sense of urgency, Hermes resolved to rescue Katya by force, but his companion quickly stepped in to stop him. He acknowledged Hermes' sense of obligation but argued that enough had already been done for her, warning him of the consequences if he persisted. He is destined to be swallowed by the capital's pervasive darkness. He details the kingdom's oppressive nature, explaining that the ruling class relies on lineage magic to safeguard their power and distinguish themselves from commoners. Caught in a perpetual cycle, they remain blinded by their own arrogance, never once seeking to change or evolve. To him, the royal capital was nothing more than a caged hell, a place from which escape seemed nearly impossible. He explained that Hermes' former master had abandoned the city to escape its corruption, admitting he envied her for having the strength to walk away. The man redirected Hermes' focus toward his true ambition, the creation of a new form of magic. He cautioned Hermes that further involvement in court affairs would lead him down a dangerous path, yet Hermes remained steadfast in his resolve. Hermes pledged to do everything in his power to save Katya, promising to stop her execution even if he couldn't manage to clear her name. Reflecting on the city's deep-seated corruption, Hermes finally understood why his master had chosen to leave it all behind. He acknowledged the grim reality of their surroundings, realizing that his companion must have witnessed enough injustice to be on the verge of losing all hope. Reflecting on the words and actions of Katya and Sarah, Hermes realized that there are still those who uphold their noble ideals and maintain their faith in goodness. He reaffirmed his conviction, certain that as long as people like them existed, the capital would always have a chance at salvation. With a look of firm determination, Hermes vows to shatter the birdcage of the corrupt capital, resolving to dismantle the entire system and leaving his companion in shock. Hermes acknowledged the risks, but insisted on saving Katya simply because he wanted to, earning a smile from the man standing before him. He remarked that such a selfish motive was perfectly in character for Hermes, and for that reason, he decided to trust him. Driven by the need to save Katya, Hermes decided to act immediately. His ally insisted he unleash his full potential, noting that time was too short for standard tactics. Without a moment's delay, Hermes agreed and set out on his rescue mission. Hermes arrived at the location where Katya was being held captive. He reflected on the moment she had come to his aid in the past. He pledged to return the favor and rescue her regardless of the cost, even as a man raised a question during their tense discussion. He urged Katya's father to restrain her reckless behavior to prevent any further tension with Prince Astor's nobles, leaving the weary man to end the meeting in a state of visible exhaustion. Following the visitor's departure, Katya questioned him, and his confirmation that the man was from the legal department underscored the political gravity of their situation, leaving her deeply concerned. When Katya expressed concern that her monster slaying in other territories might be causing trouble, her father proudly reassured her that her actions had saved countless lives. She resolved to stay true to her principles, though her actions ultimately deepened the rift between the legal department and the aristocrats. Katya reflected on her mother's guidance regarding what it meant to be an exemplary noble. From that point on, she dedicated her life to her responsibilities and ideals, yet she now begins to wonder if the path she chose was truly the right one. Trapped and weighed down by guilt, Katya stares at Sarah's injuries, questioning if her choices up to this point were truly justified. While discussing Katya's arrest, 2 guards labeled her as defective, interpreting her lack of resistance as a silent admission of guilt. From his hiding spot, the young man was stunned to overhear that she had surrendered without a fight, despite being completely innocent. The young man launched a surprise attack on the guards watching Katya, swiftly knocking them unconscious. After neutralizing the threat, he calmly apologizes and states he bears no personal grudge, then immediately resumes his rescue mission. The young man notified the guard that he carried official authorization from the Ministry of Justice to exercise any power necessary. In the meantime, Katya remained isolated and quiet within the confines of her cell. Upon reaching Katya's cell, Hermes apologized for his delay, leaving her stunned and questioning how he had managed to find his way there. He calmly detailed how he had used forbidden spells to mask his presence and eliminate the guards, all to ensure her rescue. Herm then unlocked the cell, prepared to lead her to safety. Looking downcast, Katya admits she has no intention of leaving the prison, as she remains burdened by the weight of her past mistakes. She blamed herself for Sarah's severe injuries, viewing her actions as a crime driven by her own selfishness. Stunned by her confession, Hermes struggled to process her words while attempting to deny her guilt. As a distraught Katya cried out in deep remorse for her actions, she felt that her independent actions and attempts to discipline the prince had backfired, leading her to believe the kingdom's decline was entirely her fault. She insisted that Hermes stay away from her, and though he tried to object, her sudden coldness left him stunned as she pushed him away to spare him from further trouble. Katya coldly remarks that Hermes only stayed by her side out of a sense of obligation, urging him to finally prioritize his true passion for magic. Noticing that he seemed truly alive while immersed in his studies, she released him from his obligations and encouraged him to pursue his own path. Reflecting on her mother's legacy as a kind and noble woman who protected the happiness of others, Katya confessed her lifelong desire to follow in her footsteps. She believed that by fighting to uphold her promise, she was finally fulfilling her true responsibilities as an aristocrat. Now she finally realizes that her past actions have been entirely inconsistent with the true virtues of nobility. Katya broke down in despair, finally acknowledging that her selfish choices had plunged the kingdom into chaos and put innocent lives at risk. She was crushed by the realization that she had even hurt those closest to her, leaving her to face the heavy burden of her reckless actions. Surprised to see Hermes in tears, Katya asked him what was wrong. Despite his attempts to mask his feelings, the gravity of the situation betrays just how shaken he truly is. She found herself weighed down by the immense pain and guilt of everything that had transpired. Hermes suddenly realized he was crying without knowing why, feeling an inexplicable pain in his chest despite being physically unhurt. As Katya looked on in surprise, he calmly accepted these emotions, finally understanding the depth of his feelings for her. Hermes fully grasped the depth of Katie's pain, offering a soft smile as he explained that his tears were merely a reflection of her own suffering. Yet even so, relieved to finally understand her perspective, Hermes adopts a solemn expression and admits Katya is right, confessing that his obsession with magic had always come before her. Ever since his expulsion from the Flembraid family, he had grown increasingly detached, losing his emotional connection to Katya and everyone else around him. Hermes reflects on his past, admitting that he suppressed his emotions as a means of survival, eventually discarding all sense of joy or sorrow to focus solely on his magic. As time passed, he realized he had lost something far more precious, his own heart, while Katya watched on in silence, feeling the gravity of his words. Hermes recalled that he had returned to the royal capital to reclaim his lost heart, leading him to seek out individuals who still possessed genuine emotions. Reuniting with Katya brought him a rare sense of joy, yet seeing her in pain filled him with sorrow, making him realize she was the one who had finally taught him how to feel again. In a poignant moment of vulnerability, Hermes finally opened up, explaining that his presence by Katya's side wasn't driven by guilt or debt, but by a genuine desire to be with her. His voice wavered as he admitted he couldn't bear the thought of a world without her, leaving Katya stunned by the genuine emotion that finally broke through his cold exterior. Tearfully, Katya admits that this is the first time Hermes has ever been so honest about his emotions. Seeing his sincerity, she confessed that she had always felt insecure, believing she was the only one easily swayed by her emotions. Reaching out toward him, she tried to speak, but her voice was barely audible. As the sound of rapid footsteps echoed through the hallway, Hermes and Katya turned in alarm, realizing the guards were closing in on them. As commands echo for his immediate capture, Hermes recognizes the weight of the situation and, with a steady gaze, quietly notes that their time has run out. Standing up, Hermes gripped Katya's shoulders and looked her firmly in the eyes, admitting he couldn't resolve her dilemmas right now before asking her directly if she truly wanted to die. Leaving her startled and speechless, Hermes continues to press her, asking if she truly wants her life to end this way, until she finally admits with a shaken, low voice that she does not. Tearfully, Katya cried out that she wasn't ready to die, as she still had so much she wanted to experience. Hermes squeezed her hand firmly and, with a faint smile, told her that knowing she felt that way was more than enough for him. Hermes extended his hand to Katya with a look of firm resolve, promising to continue living his life by her side. As fire and confusion erupted around them, the guards struggled to reach the pair, but Hermes kept her firmly in his grasp. Harnessing his magic, the pair took flight and escaped into the moonlit night. Hermes advised Katya to brace herself as he picked up the pace, and she held him tightly while they streaked across the sky, leaving the prison behind and vanishing under the light of the full moon. Under the cover of night, a soldier rushed to the throne room to report that Lady Katya had escaped her imprisonment with the help of her mage servant. While the prince reacted with genuine shock, the man seated on the throne remained silent, his expression darkening with clear irritation at the news. Hermes attempted to justify his actions, but he was quickly silenced by the prince's wrath, who blamed him for constantly sabotaging his schemes, especially now that Katya had been captured. Deciding that he can no longer rely on his subordinates, the prince takes matters into his own hands. Overwhelmed with rage, the prince declared he would personally apprehend Katya, cursing the demons who brought ruin to the kingdom. Vowing to prove he was the true mage chosen by God, he ordered Chris to accompany him and rectify the failure of letting her escape. Once her treatment was finished, the prince paid Sarah a visit. He then inquired about the progress of her recovery. He explained that Katya's magical assault had left her severely wounded, noting that she likely couldn't recall the event before informing Sarah of Katya's betrayal. Despite how unbelievable it might seem, he remained completely determined. Sarah then asked if she could join him on his way. She expressed her desire to witness firsthand how he intended to settle the dispute with Katya, Pleased that Sarah had finally recognized Katie's true nature, the prince granted her permission to join him and ordered his troops to prepare for a dawn departure to confront the alleged demons. Watching the prince depart, Sorrow quietly whispered Hermes' name, her expression clouded by a sense of melancholy as she reflected on the past. Isolated under the moonlight, she began to wonder if her recent decisions were truly for the best. While taking a break in the forest, Katie noted how experienced Hermes seemed with camping, leading him to explain that his training under his master often required spending nights in remote areas during dungeon expeditions. Hermes urged Katya to remain patient, assuring her that Jurgen would eventually clear her name. Noticing her visible distress, he suggested she take some time to rest, recalling the advice his master had once given him. As physical exhaustion sets in, the mind often begins to dwell on negative thoughts. Hermes prepared a simple soup of vegetables and dried meat, earning Katya's praise after she sampled the flavor. Impressed that he could create such a delicious meal with minimal ingredients, she smiled and praised his remarkable talent. Hermes asks if Katya can sleep despite the harsh conditions, and after she assures him she can, he stays awake to keep watch while she rests. They realize that as soon as dawn broke, the prince's troops would begin hunting for them. As Katya slept, Hermes vowed to protect her until her innocence was established, reflecting on how his own impulsive nature had led them to this point. Suddenly sensing an unusual presence approaching, he immediately went on high alert. Waking in a state of panic, Katya called for Hermes, who responded with a calm voice to reassure her of his presence. He offered some reassurance as she struggled to process what had just happened. Katya frantically rushes to Hermes, gripped by panic as she realizes she has lost her sight. In a state of panic, she questioned if something was wrong with her eyes as Hermes attempted to soothe her and make sense of the situation. Terrified by the absolute darkness, a rare experience outside the brightly lit capital, Katie clung tightly to Hermes. He attempted to reassure her while casting a light spell to banish the surrounding darkness. Hermes unleashed a light spell, effectively neutralizing the threat. Katya felt a surge of relief upon realizing her eyes were unharmed, discovering that the darkness was merely a magical phenomenon. Flushed with embarrassment, Katie found herself speechless in the wake of the tense encounter. Feeling the awkwardness, Hermes attempts to lighten the mood with a joke, but she panics and begs him to stop, claiming she would rather die of shame. The following morning, Hermes and Katie headed to a nearby village to restock their supplies, where they once again encountered the village chief. Recognizing them instantly, the individual welcomed them with a heartfelt mix of surprise and delight. In gratitude for their past assistance, the village chief thanked Hermes and Katie, offering them whatever resources they might need. Katie expressed her sincere thanks and pledged to return the favor in her family's name, however, the man stood firm, asserting that their debt had yet to be repaid. Recognizing Katie as the one who saved her, a young girl rushes over in excitement to offer her thanks before leading her away by the hand to show her something. The village chief and Hermes are left stunned by the scene as the young girl leads Katie and Hermes toward a construction site. Nearby, a group of villagers were hard at work, digging and rebuilding the surrounding area. Startled by the unfolding events, Katie watched intently while trying to make sense of the situation. The chief detailed their defensive strategy, explaining that the new moat and watchtowers were being built to safeguard the village against monster attacks. The young girl excitedly explained that everyone had been cooperating ever since Katie saved them. He noted that, inspired by her example, the villagers had begun taking initiative rather than relying solely on the nobility. The villagers explained that they had finally united to defend their land, showing a level of resolve they never thought possible. The villagers expressed their gratitude to Katie for the positive changes she brought, but she humbly tries to deflect their praise, still weighed down by the guilt of believing she was the reason the monsters attacked. Observing the villagers' unwavering resolve, Katie realized that claiming sole responsibility would only diminish the value of their hard work. Watching in silence, she realized they had chosen to fight on their own, and that any intervention might only insult the courage they were now displaying. With great enthusiasm, the young girl shared that she had begun her magical studies, having discovered a specific type that she was capable of performing. Inspired by Katie, she pledges to work tirelessly to become a formidable mage, undeterred by her lack of noble status. Gazing toward the horizon, Katie whispered her mother's name with a distant look in her eyes. While Hermes sensed a shift in her demeanor, the young girl and the others simply watched in silent confusion. Recalling her mother's lessons on noble duty and protecting the common folk, Katie realized she had been bound by those expectations her entire life. She had dismissed the villagers as weak, only to realize they possessed a level of strength far beyond her expectations. As the group shared their sincere thanks and bid the villagers farewell, Katie reflected on how the experience had proven far more meaningful than she ever could have anticipated. Hermes urged the village chief to prioritize the safety of the residents should their pursuers arrive. Following their farewells, He and Katie continued their journey in silence as the villagers offered their well wishes. As they strolled along, Hermes couldn't help but notice how much more composed and self-assured Katie had become. After everything they had endured together, he sensed that she had undergone a genuine change for the better. By later that afternoon, the prince had reached the village, flanked by his men. Fixing them with a cold stare, he demanded the whereabouts of the purple-haired woman and the silver-haired man. The village chief grew visibly uneasy as he stood before the prince. He took a moment to recall the advice Hermes had given him. He firmly denied any knowledge of the person, even as he felt the weight of the noble's threatening gazes. Feeling his authority challenged, the prince cast a furious glare at the village chief. Yet the man remained composed and insisted he had no knowledge of the people the prince was seeking. Following a moment of heavy silence, the prince ultimately chose to withdraw. Deciding that was sufficient, he ordered the group to continue forward. However, he casts a spell before making his exit, leaving a lingering sense of danger in the air. Upon uncovering lingering magical traces, the prince confirmed that Hermes and Katie had indeed been in the village. A cold smile played on his lips as he realized the chief had lied, and he vowed to make sure the deception didn't go unpunished. The prince coldly orders the village to be set ablaze, showing complete indifference toward its inhabitants. Hermes catches the scent of smoke, instantly putting him on high alert. He turned his gaze toward the distant horizon. To their horror, the pair discovered that the entire village was engulfed in flames. The soldiers stood by and watched as the village was slowly consumed by the spreading fire. The prince commanded his men to scour the area for survivors, ensuring that no one was allowed to escape. Fearing for the safety of the villagers, Katie attempted to rush toward the burning town, but Hermes intervened to keep her away from the inferno. Unexpectedly, the village chief and the others appeared alive, calling out to her with a sense of relief. Relief washed over Katie and Hermes as they regrouped with the villagers and confirmed that everyone was safe. The chief explained that Prince Aster had arrived before the fire broke out, only to depart shortly before the flames consumed everything. The girl explains that they were only saved by a stroke of blind luck, catching Katie completely off guard. As the man shielded the girl from the surrounding inferno, a mysterious blonde-haired girl suddenly appeared. By invoking her powerful lineage magic, Spirit Veil, she manifests a protective barrier that shields them from the encroaching flames. The blonde girl urged the villagers to flee while using her magic to clear an escape route for them. After successfully shielding them from the flames and mending their wounds, she rescued those unable to escape, only to vanish before anyone could offer their gratitude. Watching her go, a stunned Katie could only whisper her name, Sarah. The villagers mourned the complete loss of their homes and the structures they had painstakingly built. Looking somber, Katie began to blame herself for the situation, believing everything went wrong because of her involvement, though Hermes quickly stepped in to reassure her that she wasn't at fault. A smug man confronted Katie and the villagers, taunting them as he confirmed she had indeed returned to the village. Wearing a chilling smirk, he called out her hypocrisy for protecting the commoners, warning that the entire community would face the consequences for harboring a criminal. Suspecting they aided in the fugitives' getaway, the man ordered the immediate arrest of all the villagers. Katie stepped in to defend them, loudly insisting that they were innocent of any wrongdoing. Hermes caught her by the arm, attempting to hold her back. Herm met Katya's gaze, his expression steady with newfound resolve. He requests her permission to face the enemy alone, leaving Katya too stunned to find her words. The other man looks on in confusion, clearly caught off guard by the sudden announcement. Herm stares down his brother and issues a challenge. If he wins, his brother must spare everyone, but if he loses, they are free to take the entire group captive. He then instructed Katya to contact Lord Jurgen for help with the evacuation and fire control, and despite her visible concern, she nodded in agreement. The two brothers confronted one another inside the church, where Herm coldly questioned why he hadn't stopped Prince Aster, accusing him of allowing the tragedy to unfold. He pointed out that many villagers had lost their homes and nearly their lives, questioning whether he felt any remorse for the tragedy. Overcome with rage, Herm's brother fiercely defended Princess Aster, loudly asserting that he was the most exceptional person in the kingdom. He asserts that anyone who defies him deserves punishment, proudly declaring himself the most loyal confidant who understands him best, while Herm watches the scene with a heavy sense of disappointment and sorrow. The brother displayed a total lack of empathy, dismissing the villagers as insignificant commoners and claiming that the loss of barely 100 lives held no real value. In reality, their fate served as a warning to anyone who dared defy Princess Aster, leaving Herm too stunned and wounded to react to such blatant cruelty. Fueled by rage, Herm's brother lashed out, demanding he stop looking down on him with such a condescending gaze. He claimed that Herm had never changed and had always looked down on him, but Herm remained silent, realizing that words would no longer make a difference. Blazing with anger, Herm's brother accepted the duel, declaring that he would remind Herm of his worthlessness and prove that he was the superior mage destined for the top. The story transitions 12 years into the past, revealing a grand mansion bathed in sunlight. The memory reveals a father commending his young son for completing a complex magic circle, labeling the boy a prodigy while the present-day Hermes watches the scene unfold in silence. He reflected on a life where he had never known the warmth of praise or the comfort of a gentle pat on the head. Consumed by rage, the father shouted and struck Hermes. He drew a harsh comparison to his younger brother, mocking him by pointing out how effortlessly Hermes had succeeded where he had failed. He tossed a spellbook at him, demanding he master its contents by dawn to prove he was a worthy heir to the Flimbert family. Despite his exhaustion, Hermes struggled to decipher the intricate magic circles covering the floor, pushing through a blinding headache to continue his work. Driven by resolve, he believed that if he succeeded, he might finally earn his father's praise one day. As the night deepened in silence, he remained fully absorbed in his studies without taking a single break. Hermes successfully activated all of the spells, leaving him visibly thrilled with the result. He rushed to his father to showcase his achievement, hoping to finally earn his respect, but his smile quickly vanished as the man's cold reaction confirmed he still wouldn't get the validation he desired. Herm enthusiastically practiced his levitation magic, skillfully maneuvering a floating teapot to pour tea with impressive precision. His father was left in disbelief, stunned that his son had mastered such a complex spell so quickly, while Hermes beamed, clearly heartened by the recognition. In the background, his older brother watched in silence, once again burdened by the heavy comparison between them. Struck by Hermes's incredible talent, the father enthusiastically named him the heir of the Flimbert family, claiming that his younger son might one day surpass even his own strength. Observing the scene from the doorway, the older brother silently turns away, his heart heavy with grief and the painful feeling of being left behind. Overcome with frustration, the older brother set fire to the magic circles he had painstakingly created. Shocked by the sight, Hermes rushes in to intervene. Unable to fathom his brother's motivations, he desperately pleads with him to stop, reminding him of the immense effort put into those spells. But his brother remains silent as he allows the flames to consume everything. Overcome with resentment, the older brother roughly shoves Hermes aside, blaming him for every hardship he's had to endure. He lashes out, blaming him for everything going wrong in his life, and claiming that his presence only brings misery, leaving Hermes frozen in place as tears begin to well up. The flames continued to burn the documents behind them, marking a final and irreversible break in their relationship. The older brother coldly recalls the moment he discovered Hermes lacked lineage magic, admitting to himself that he felt a sense of relief in teaching the boy that effort doesn't always yield results. While a young and dejected Hermes sat isolated behind bars, this encounter ignited a bitter grudge that would continue to simmer for years. Herm's brother erupted in a fit of furious laughter, pointing at him and claiming that he finally got what he deserved. He realized the other man never understood the depth of the misery he caused, and felt it was only fair to make him endure that same pain. He tells himself that this path will finally free him from his insecurities, even though he knows deep down that he's only lying to himself. The brothers locked eyes with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. The elder, barely suppressing his fury, demanded to know how much longer Herm would continue to plague his life. Herm stood his ground, declaring that he too was done with their conflict and intended to settle it permanently. The two then prepared for a duel that would be fueled as much by their magical power as by the years of pent-up emotions between them. Both brothers release a powerful surge of magic as the elder begins his incantation, invoking the 6 sacred bows and the arm of a false god while energy concentrates in his hand. Herm responds with steady resolve, explaining the world's origin and the absolute truth inscribed there. A place where heaven and earth are one, all for the sake of a single miracle. They unleashed their spells simultaneously, flooding the area with a surge of light and energy that would finally determine the outcome of their battle. Both unleashed their spells simultaneously, creating a massive collision that shook the entire structure and tore through the building with a burst of magical energy. Clutching his grimoire, the boy began to cast an intricate spell. A massive arcane circle manifested behind him. He unleashed a barrage of energy projectiles with a decisive gesture, announcing his spell as Magical Bullet Archer, Miss Daltina, while a distant mage watched with irritation, noting that he was using the same technique yet again. Unleashing a powerful attack, the enemy roared in fury, declaring that his composure would only last for a moment longer. Unfazed by the incoming assault, the boy anticipated a direct clash and activated his grimoire, channeling his full strength into a decisive counterattack. He narrowly evaded the explosion, watching in disbelief as the ground around him was reduced to rubble. His eyes widened in shock as he realized the sheer scale of the attack he had only just managed to dodge. Violent bursts of magic erupted before him, sending debris flying in all directions. He observed the enemy's attacks gaining momentum as the opposing mage laughed, clearly emboldened by his sudden surge in power. Remaining composed amidst the wreckage, the young man claims that his strength has also increased and he has yet to reveal his full potential. Sensing a surge of intense magical energy radiating from his opponent, the boy was taken aback and questioned what secret was being concealed within his chest. With a confident smile, he raised his hand and began gathering his energy, promising to finally reveal the secret behind his strength. The young man was left speechless as his opponent unveiled a staff intricately adorned with wings and a serpent. With a proud smile, the mage revealed that his weapon was a divine artifact known as caduceus, personally entrusted to him by Princess Aster for the battle. The boy quickly realized that his rival was using the artifact to augment his magical power. Flashing a confident grin, he raised his staff and declared that his power wasn't limited to what they'd seen, causing a surge of energy to erupt as he prepared to reveal the true potential of his magical bullet archer class. His expression twisted with mania. The mage channeled his power through his staff until he was engulfed in fire, raising the blazing weapon to unleash his spell, Magical Bullet Archer, Ms. Daltina. A powerful surge of magical fire erupted, unleashing a wave of devastating force. Watching the flaming bullets hurtle toward him, the boy sensed their overwhelming power and realized he couldn't block them, leaving him with only a split second to act. He charged through the flames, demolishing everything in his path. The mage taunted him, bragging that his caduceus staff infuses his bullets with fire to drastically increase their power. Carefully assessing the situation, the boy acknowledged the artifact's immense power while remaining focused on finding a way to overcome it. Smirking arrogantly, the mage prepared to bring the battle to a swift conclusion. He unleashes a torrent of flames upon his opponent, leaving the boy with barely enough time to shield himself as the fire consumes his surroundings to the sound of maniacal laughter. The mage declares this to be his authentic magic, showcasing the sheer might of a magical bullet archer. He proudly asserts that a mere imitator could never reach this level of mastery as the force of the explosion sends his rival reeling. His expression twisted with madness. The mage shouted that he was superior in every way, from his raw power to his innate magical talent. He sneered at his opponent and dismissed them as a failure, fully certain of his own triumph. In a distant memory, a woman performs a ritual for a young boy, handing him a glowing grimoire, and confirming that the inheritance of the inscription is now complete. Mesmerized by the book's immense power, the boy listened as she asked him what he could see within its pages. Peering into the grimoire, the boy found himself staring at an intricate series of symbols and runes that he couldn't begin to decipher. Smiling, she explained that the symbols before him were the primordial inscription, an ancient form of magic he had just inherited. She clarified that magic is not a divine blessing, but a human science built on logical principles, with the primordial inscription serving as its core foundation. The collection featured 69 magical languages and over 300 circle patterns, and she explained that mastering them would allow him to cast any spell regardless of his bloodline. She elaborated that aristocrats possess inherited magic, which allows them to wield their power naturally and without any effort. However, she makes it clear that his situation is unique, requiring him to study and train much harder if he hopes to reach that level. Fixing him with a serious expression, she asked for his thoughts on the matter. She turned to the boy, asking for his thoughts after he learned how difficult it is to master magic without a proper lineage. Gazing at the radiant grimoire, he offered a sincere smile and remarked on how beautiful magic truly is. Staring at the intricate grimoire, the boy admitted his lack of understanding, yet he found the magic beautiful and resolved to one day master the craft its creators worked so hard to build. Driven by curiosity about the origins of magic, the boy dedicated himself to his studies, recording a vow in his notebook to one day master the craft entirely. Over time, the boy faced numerous failures and moments of frustration, yet he never wavered. Despite the difficulty of his path, his passion for magic and drive to learn pushed him forward, refusing to let any hardship slow him down. Despite the constant setbacks and frustrations, he continues to push forward, fueled by a passion for magic and a relentless drive that makes surrendering impossible, no matter how grueling the training becomes. Battered but unyielding, the boy stood his ground and confronted his brother, asserting that he understood nothing. He raises his grimoire, asserting that the true essence of magic lies beyond raw power as he prepares to demonstrate his own capabilities. Activating his technique, the boy cast resolve to manifest the magical archer, Ms. Daltina, imbuing her with an ice attribute to create a massive crystal barrier against his brother's flames. Enveloped in a freezing aura, the boy advances with determination while his grimoire glows brightly. He stares at his stunned brother and calmly informs him that the lesson is still ongoing, signaling that the battle is far from over. The brother watched in amazement as the boy merged his ice and water attributes. Standing amidst a field of crystals, his grimoire pulsed with light as the surrounding air froze under the pressure of his immense power. The brother erupted in a fit of rage, convinced his magic had been stolen. Yet the boy remained completely unfazed. He noted that the magical bullet archer's enchantment significantly amplified his power, granting him much sharper precision and refined control. The boy explained that imbuing magic with a specific element is the fundamental step. Furthermore, this trait creates a specific vulnerability when facing incompatible elements. He points out that fire is naturally weak against elements like ice and water, highlighting a critical flaw in his brother's ability. Stunned to find himself at a disadvantage, the brother is advised by the boy to change his attribute. Before he could finish his sentence, the other let out a scream of pure rage. He followed up by launching another fire-infused strike. After activating an enhancement spell, the boy surged forward with incredible speed. The ground shattered beneath his feet while his brother stood frozen, completely paralyzed by shock. The boy rushed forward, successfully landing a solid blow on his brother. He details how magic can be channeled internally to reinforce the muscles and push physical power to its absolute limit. Infuriated, the brother launches a counterattack, yelling for him to drop the know-it-all attitude. He unleashed a massive blast that shook the earth, but the boy managed to dodge the impact at full speed. Infuriated by his inability to land a blow, the brother let out a scream of rage and began mimicking the boy's impressive speed. Determined to match his opponent's power, he activated an enhancement spell, only for the attempt to backfire. Unable to withstand the overwhelming magical pressure, his body gave way as his legs snapped under the immense strain. Maintaining a steady gaze, the boy warned him not to attempt that again. Despite his injuries, the brother stubbornly forced himself to stand with his staff in hand. Although his body had reached its absolute limit, he insisted on pushing forward, while the boy explained that the technique required a level of magical control he had yet to master. Unwilling to admit defeat, his brother calls out his name in a moment of pure desperation. Staring him down with a firm gaze and a clenched fist, the boy questioned if he finally recognized the vast difference between them. Driven by resolve, the boy channeled his power to show his brother the proper way to utilize it. Bolstering his arms with magic, he delivered a direct punch that landed with heavy impact. He demonstrated a level of control that proved his absolute mastery. The boy declared the battle finished as his brother lay beaten on the ground, yet the fallen sibling remained fueled by rage, blood staining his lips. Rising slowly, the brother accused him of trying to strip everything away from him yet again. Filled with resentment, the older brother reflected on how his life had changed for the worse since the birth of his younger sibling. He cried out that from that moment forward he had lost everything. His father's approval, his public recognition, and even his innate magical talent. Driven to a breaking point, he lashed out at his brother, shouting that he was tired of having everything taken away from him. He admitted he believed his hard-earned power would finally allow him to surpass his brother. But even with that strength, he still fell short. His brother listened in silence, offering no anger, only a quiet sense of regret. The older brother rose to his feet and apologized while keeping his gaze lowered. Still sprawled on the ground, the younger brother was left completely speechless by the unexpected apology. The younger brother made it clear that he could not forgive what had transpired. Looking back on his time with the Marquis family, he admits he used to treat his brother as if he didn't exist, finally recognizing the full extent of his past neglect. The sudden turn of events caught the older brother completely off guard. He reflected on the past, remembering when his only priority was increasing his magical strength. Despite living under the same roof and being constantly around one another, he remained completely indifferent toward his brother, lacking any desire to truly understand him. Acknowledging that their past was set in stone, he reflected on how his encounters with others had transformed him, leading to the realization that magic is mastered through first-hand experience rather than simple observation. At the very least, he now wanted to be sincere about his true emotions. The older brother offered a heartfelt apology, expressing genuine remorse for everything he had done. Visibly frustrated, the younger brother rejected the apology, insisting that it was far too late for words after everything they had been through and pleading for him to stop. Clenching his fists, the younger brother broke down in tears, shouting that such an apology was the ultimate cruelty. This only serves to further deepen his sense of misery. Overwhelmed with emotion, the younger brother collapsed to the ground in tears. He reflected on his time in the Flembrade family, wondering if a genuine conversation with his brother might have changed their fate. He questioned if a typical sibling relationship was ever possible, but realized it was far too late to change their history. As he glanced back, he spotted another figure watching the scene from a distance. The older brother glanced up, realizing that Prince Aster was watching him from a higher vantage point. He rose to his feet with firm determination, reminding himself that his work was not yet finished. He walked away, leaving his brother behind as he focused on the path ahead with firm determination. He was finally prepared to confront the weight of his past, determined to settle every lingering grudge and conflict once and for all. Standing alongside a group of knights outside the massive structure, the girl appeared taken aback as a figure approached her. She held a handkerchief, appearing to be waiting for or lost in thought about someone important. Katya called out in relief at the sight of him, and he quickly reassured the group that Chris had been defeated and was unlikely to return to the battlefield. A sense of relief washed over the group as they realized the worst of the crisis was finally behind them. When he asked Katya about the state of the village, she explained that soldiers had arrived shortly after they parted ways and managed to extinguish most of the fires. Although the villagers are finally out of danger, a sense of unease lingers, and Katya grows visibly emotional as she looks over the people they managed to rescue. Clearly distressed, Katya suggests that the villagers seek refuge at a nearby noble's mansion. A messenger had already been dispatched, but witnessing the aftermath proved difficult for everyone, especially her. Sensing her grief, the protagonist offered Katya quiet comfort as she struggled to hold back her tears. Leaving the village ruins behind, they found a quiet spot to sit together in silence. Katya admitted that she hadn't stopped trembling since witnessing the village burn, fearing that her reaction made her look pathetic. It's clear that Katya is still deeply troubled by the recent events, blaming herself for the lives that were nearly lost. Despite the village being saved thanks to Sarah's intervention, she remains frustrated by her own perceived weakness. Grappling with guilt, Katya began to doubt her own capabilities, admitting she had always aspired to follow in her mother's footsteps. However, despite her best efforts, she eventually realized she simply couldn't live up to that standard. What once felt like her mother's encouragement to become a prominent aristocrat has turned into a burden, leaving Katya to fear the consequences of continuing to push herself so hard. He encouraged Katie to stay true to her emotions, assuring her that she would eventually introduce her mother. He reassured her that the resolve she had always possessed remained entirely unbroken. He encourages her to stay true to herself and continue pursuing her ambitions with the same drive she's always had. His master granted him a formidable magic called Hermes, but strictly warned that it should only be used as a final resort. Since this magic is linked to his master's secret identity, using it would reveal her true self. He is informed that he'll be staying in the royal capital moving forward, but he is strictly warned to only use the spell in a dire emergency. As he activated the magic, he chanted a spell and proclaimed its strength, causing a brilliant light to burst forth. He summoned the magic to release its full power, leaving Katya to watch in wonder as the spell swept across the edge of the world. Magical feathers and swirling energy filled the atmosphere as he finalized the spell, fully unleashing the technique. Great Seamless Eagle, praise Velger. As his true form is revealed, Katya stands frozen at the sight of his massive magical wings. She immediately recognizes the signature of a potent bloodline magic, which he attributes to his mentor, Rose the Sky Witch, before the two of them take flight into the vast sky. He reveals that Rose, formerly known as Roselia Kirsch von Ustia, is more than just his master. She is a legendary figure and the third princess of a previous generation. Despite being the most gifted triple aptitude mage in history, her extraordinary power led to her exile from the capital, yet she remains the person he respects most in the world. As he soared through the sky alongside Katya, he found himself reflecting on everything his master had taught him. During his training, one of the most pivotal questions she posed was what magic truly meant to him, an inquiry that resonated deeply and ultimately defined his entire perspective on his craft. Initially unable to define what magic meant to him, he eventually concludes that it is like a story, a unique perspective that catches Katya by surprise as they soar together toward the setting sun. He explains that every spell originates from a person's story or deepest wish, and by using primordial inscriptions to recreate them, one can uncover the creator's original intent. Ultimately, this reveals that the true foundation of all magic is nothing more than raw feelings and desires. He turned to Katya, asking for her perspective on what the original wish behind the Great Seamless Eagle might have been. Katya speculated that it might have been intended for mobility or combat, noting how the Sky Witch, Rose, utilized it to navigate the skies and overcome her enemies. She questioned the motive behind such a powerful spell, but he clarified that the true desire driving the magic was actually quite simple. He harbored a sincere longing to soar through the open sky. This ambition was driven by a sense of pure and intense passion. While analyzing the magic, he could distinctly feel the emotions the creator had poured into it. He reassured Katya that he understood the weight of chasing unattainable ideals, relating her personal struggle to the same kind of distant dream. He confesses that pursuing an impossible dream can feel like torture, yet he encourages Katya to persevere, promising that the struggle will be worth it once her wish finally comes true. Anticipating an incredible view, he hopes she will allow him to stay by her side to witness the moment she finally achieves her goal. He confessed to Katya that he had admired her character ever since the day she offered him encouragement at the cell. Reflecting on that moment, Katya felt deeply moved and wondered if she would ever be capable of creating something as beautiful as that memory. He offers Katya some much-needed reassurance, reaffirming his confidence in her abilities. He reassured her that she wasn't alone, promising to stay by her side through whatever came next. A smile crossed her face, filled with a sense of comfort and hope as they prepared to face the future together. Herm's sudden voice startled Katya, catching her completely off guard. He mentions that he has something of great importance to share with her. While taking in the breathtaking view by her side, he experienced a sudden and profound realization about his true feelings. Herm began to contemplate the true significance of Katya's magic, known as the Hell of Salvation. He prepares to reveal his perspective on true value, hinting that it is far more profound than simple power. While Chris remains nearby, wounded and bleeding, Chris struggled to understand how he lost to Herm, despite them both utilizing the same magic bullet archer technique, leaving him to question what set his opponent apart and what he himself was lacking. Chris watched Herm depart in a state of shock, left to wonder what kind of training had granted him such immense strength over the past 5 years. Meanwhile, Prince Aster makes an unexpected appearance, catching everyone completely off guard. Looking down at Chris, Prince Aster bluntly remarked on his pathetic defeat as a healer hurried over to tend to his wounds. Aster pointed out that Chris was ultimately unable to back up his empty boasts, ordering him to leave as soon as his wounds were treated with a final warning never to show his face again. Aster issues a lethal warning, vowing to incinerate Chris if he ever dares to return, and making it clear that there will be no second chances. Chris stood with the remaining soldiers, watching as Aster and the others made their departure. Without saying a word, he turned and walked away, appearing isolated and defeated as he disappeared into the woods. As sunlight filters through the canopy, Chris continues his solitary trek through the forest toward a horse-drawn wagon waiting on the trail below. Chris informs Katya that he will command his soldiers to evacuate the village, where the residents have already begun huddling together. As the group waited in tense silence, Chris quietly observed the growing anxiety etched on everyone's faces. Chris was taken aback when his brother suddenly appeared and called out to him. His brother attempted to de-escalate the tension, clarifying that he wasn't there for a fight and only had one specific matter he wanted to discuss. The two brothers faced each other with heavy expressions as Chris's brother insisted on asking one final, crucial question. Grappling with his recent loss, Chris questions his brother to find the answers he truly seeks. He admitted that he hasn't been able to stop dwelling on his defeat, still questioning how he lost when they both wielded the same bloodline magic. Adopting a more serious tone, he questioned his brother about his activities over the last 5 years. He explained that his growth was simply the result of relentless magic training, but Chris remained skeptical and continued to press him for a better answer. Wondering if there was a hidden secret behind his brother's immense power, he asked if he truly understood the nature of bloodline magic. Hermes decided that a direct demonstration would be far more effective than any verbal explanation. He then produced a magic book, which was an exact replica of the one he typically carries. Stunned and bewildered, Chris struggled to process the idea that Hermes would give away his magic so casually. Hermes clarifies that the primordial inscription isn't a restricted form of magic, as it was actually designed for anyone to use. Surprisingly, even Chris is authorized to use it. He is instructed to expand his magical output, with his mentor pointing out exactly where to deploy the magic bullet archer. Though caught off guard, Chris began following the instructions, prompting Hermes to ask if he could perceive anything new after expanding his magical reach. Chris stared in shock at the floating inscription, his disbelief growing as a flurry of mysterious symbols and magic circles materialized to completely obscure his vision. Chris clutched his face in a sudden surge of pain and shock, while Hermes stood nearby with the book in hand, silently observing his reaction. Overwhelmed and disoriented by the sudden influx of information, Chris realized that what he had witnessed was an incredibly complex system. The magic circles were layered with an indecipherable language composed of intricate symbols and formulas. Hermes explains that this is his constant perspective, warning Chris that attempting to fully grasp it would likely be enough to make his head explode. When Hermes revealed that Chris's innate magic was built upon a remarkably intricate structure, Chris was stunned, having never suspected his power was so complex. Hermes points out that Chris still wields his magic instinctively, leaving Chris stunned as he realizes the divine gift is far more technical and intricate than he ever imagined. Losing his composure, Chris snaps that the idea of anyone being able to use the power is a lie, as he finds the extreme effort required to master lineage magic both impossible and absurd. Hermes calmly explains to Chris that he possesses no innate talent, having simply dedicated 5 years to daily practice. He maintains that anyone could achieve the same results with enough time, even if it took him half a decade to reach this level. Feeling dismissed, a frustrated Chris accused Hermes of making his hard work seem trivial, questioning if the deity truly believed his feats could be easily replicated by just anyone. Hermes calmly shared that he had faced a similar struggle when he discovered he lacked lineage magic, feeling as though all his hard work had been for nothing. Chris reflected on the fact that Hermes had never truly abandoned magic, regardless of the trials he'd endured. He questioned why Hermes would go to such extremes for magic, but Hermes only offered a simple smile in response. Ultimately, his actions were driven by a deep-seated passion for magic. A look of shock crossed Chris's face as a crucial realization finally dawned on him. He finally realized that Hermes possessed something he lacked. Suddenly, someone rushed over and called out to him as their big brother. A young girl rushes over with a smile, announcing that her brother has been searching for him. Noticing the atmosphere, she asks if she interrupted an important conversation, but Hermes reassures her with a smile and agrees to accompany her right away. He then walks away with the girl, leaving Chris behind to watch them in silence from the ground. As they depart, the girl stays close to Hermes, clearly demonstrating their deep sibling-like connection. Chris sat alone on the grass, looking defeated as he brooded over the outcome. He finally admitted to himself that he had been beaten in a direct confrontation. Overwhelmed by the feeling that he has nothing left, the scene emphasizes his internal emptiness and the crushing weight of his defeat against Hermes. Chris discovered the magic book Hermes had left behind, his expression initially frozen in shock. Reflecting on Hermes, Chris could almost hear the man's voice challenging him to take the leap, leading him to wonder if the book had been left there intentionally to push him forward. Chris felt a surge of motivation after examining the book, declaring that he would achieve his goal no matter how many years it took. Recognizing that this was an attainable goal for anyone, he convinced himself that he could succeed as well, resolving to press on with newfound energy and hope. The villagers busied themselves with preparations, loading their belongings onto horse-drawn wagons for the journey ahead. Standing slightly off to the side, Katie offered a warm wave goodbye, which the young girl enthusiastically returned. As the group set off, Katie remained behind, silently watching them depart. With a look of firm resolve, Katie informed Herm that she had finally decided to stop running away. Determined to prevent another tragedy from occurring, she finally resolved to take action. Determined to resolve her feud with Prince Aster once and for all, Katie pressed on, fully aware of the potential risks to those around her. Herm supported her decision, noting that the prince was unpredictable and that Sarah was currently by his side. Herm assures Katie that she won't have to face this alone, vowing to fight by her side until the very end and bringing a reassured smile to her face. Reports from the soldiers reveal that Prince Aster is taking refuge in a nearby abandoned castle, prompting Katie to decide it's finally time to move out. He informed Herm that the time had come to demonstrate their sense of justice, and with a shared look of resolve, the two prepared to set out. A soldier delivers word to Prince Aster that Katie and her servant are currently making their way toward the castle. The prince appeared intrigued and slightly amused, while the girl at his side was visibly startled to learn that Katie was approaching. Informed that the criminals were approaching the castle of their own volition, the prince dismissed a soldier's offer to capture them, deciding instead to. With an air of confidence, he instructed them to prepare a grand reception for Katie and her party. Katie and her ally pressed forward with grim determination, as she resolved to continue their journey until the world finally understood who truly represented justice. Katie and her companion made their way through the castle, surprised by how little resistance they had encountered at the entrance. Observing the prince's absolute confidence in his own strength, Katie decided to accept his challenge. Katie and her friend made their way into a nearby courtyard. They arrived to find Prince Aster and his companion already waiting for them. Aster welcomed the group, noting that they had finally arrived and that their confrontation was about to begin. Spotting Sarah, Katie expressed her relief that she was unharmed, leading a surprised Sarah to call out to her. Stepping forward, the prince asks if Katie is finally ready to confess her crimes now that she's arrived voluntarily, but she remains completely defiant. Stepping forward, Katie issued a direct challenge to Aster, making it clear that he was the sole reason for her arrival. Clearly surprised, he questioned whether she truly intended to face him alone, mockingly referring to her as a defective girl. Katie made it clear she was no longer the person he once knew, challenging Aster to settle their differences in a fair, one-on-one duel. Aster laughed at her, mocking her arrogance and her clear lack of control over her own magical abilities. Accepting her challenge regardless, he addressed her with an air of total confidence. He declared that he would burn away Katie's sins and pride, challenging her to face him in battle. With a clear sense of purpose, Katie turned and walked away. Nearby, a voice softly called out her name, sounding noticeably concerned. Aster commands his guards to deal with Hermes while Katie prepares to depart, receiving a final word of encouragement and a promise of prayer for her success. Katya and Aster proceed into the castle, while the soldiers step in to block Hermes from following them. Hermes asked Sarah if she was willing to follow him. Standing as Aster's allies, they joined the battle against him. Sarah hesitated, unsure of her next move, as the soldiers intervened and ordered her to stay back, confident they could handle Hermes on their own. Hermes dismissed the soldiers, making it clear that his words were intended for someone else. Sarah softly called out to him, and he turned to face her. Ever since then, he has been deeply reflecting on his true feelings. Hermes reflected on the deep-seated fear he once held for Prince Aster, constantly anxious about the repercussions his family and friends might face if he ever fell out of favor. Observing the prince upon the throne, Hermes reflects on the severe wounds he sustained from Katya's previous magical assault. Despite hearing the prince accuse Katya of betrayal, Sarah refused to believe him, firmly convinced that her friend was incapable of such an act. Determined to stop hurting her loved ones and being misled by the prince's lies, Sarah resolves to no longer act as his accomplice. Sarah rushed toward the village, which was already being consumed by flames. Observing the terrified villagers, she stood before the prince with trembling legs, finally realizing that she could no longer let fear control her life. Despite her fear, she realized she had no choice but to take action. Sarah reflected on the importance of fighting with sincerity and infusing her magic with her genuine emotions. She wondered if observing their magic firsthand would provide a clearer window into their true nature. Considering the possibility, Sarah asked to see the other person's magic. Recalling their earlier conversation about the power of emotions, they explained that their magical expertise was primarily dedicated to healing and defensive support. Surrounded by soldiers, Sarah informs Hermes that she will prove her resilience by enduring every attack he throws at her. Hermes accepts the challenge, stepping forward to act as her opponent. Hermes rushed forward, loudly announcing his approach. However, the knights intercepted him, making it clear that they would not allow him to pass. Hermes skillfully evaded the incoming strikes and launched a counterattack against the knights. However, Paulina soon intervenes with her healing magic, allowing the knights to recover quickly as they marvel at her impressive skill. The knights revere Paulina as a goddess of the battlefield, knowing that as long as her mana remains, her support makes the squad nearly invincible. Recognizing the weight of the challenge before him, Hermes decides it's time to fight in earnest. Hermes channeled his magic to activate the 6 sacred bows, unleashing a devastating strike. Paulina attempts to intercept the attack by deploying her own defensive magic. The knights stood paralyzed in shock, taken aback by the overwhelming strength behind the attack. While Hermes' attack is undeniably swift and powerful, Paulina begins to recognize its clear limitations. She urged the knights to remain composed and track the attack's trajectory to evade it. Hermes was caught off guard by how quickly they managed to decipher the inner workings of his magic. Launching a coordinated assault, the knights managed to trap Hermes and shatter his magical barrier. Paulina senses the pressure they're exerting and believes they can win if they maintain their momentum, yet Hermes remains entirely unfazed. Hermes caught Paulina and the knights completely off guard by suddenly shifting his combat style. His movements became significantly faster and more precise, leaving Paulina unable to react in time. He notices that while Hermes' strikes were once simple and direct, he has now transitioned to a far more sophisticated technique. Hermes demonstrates that his true strength lies in his rapid evolution, allowing him to sharpen his techniques as the fight progresses. Despite being exiled from the capital for lacking bloodline magic, his overwhelming power has now become impossible for everyone to ignore. The spectators were stunned to see Katya's supposedly weak servant display such overwhelming strength, leaving those with innate bloodline magic in disbelief that Hermes had attained such power through sheer effort. The onlookers were left speechless, watching him fight and cast spells with a sense of pure, unbridled freedom. Sarah began to suspect that the emotion she was experiencing was actually envy. Hermes' expertise is only the beginning, as he possesses a far more vital quality that likely remains unrivaled. Ultimately, the knights were forced to concede their total defeat before him. Katya unleashed a magical strike, releasing an immense surge of power. She felt she hadn't yet reached her breaking point, and was confident she could push herself even further. Aster watched her efforts with a stoic expression, his confidence remaining completely unshaken. Aster acknowledges Katya's growth in strength, but warns that her current level of power still isn't enough to take him down. Growing weary of the uninspiring exchange, he decided it was time to bring the battle to a close. Aster unleashed a strike of overwhelming power. The force of the impact ended up obliterating a section of the castle. He calmly made his way through the wreckage, never once glancing back at the destruction behind him. Upon returning, Aster surveyed the castle's remains with a look of visible disappointment. The confrontation proved to be far less exhilarating than he had initially anticipated. Ultimately, he mocked his opponent, pointing out that he remained a failure until the very end. As the smoke clears, Katya emerges completely unharmed, much to Aster's shock. Stunned that she had survived his flames, He struggled to comprehend how a girl he viewed as defective could emerge completely uninjured. Standing her ground with resolve, Katya shouted that the battle was far from over and had only just begun. Mocking her for managing to dodge once, the enemy warned her not to get overconfident before unleashing a devastating strike. Positioned at the front line, Katya braced herself against the impact, holding her ground even as the soldiers around her fell. Realizing this won't be enough to defeat her, the antagonist announces that everyone present will witness the punishment he's about to inflict, while a concerned ally watches and cries out for Katie. Recalling Hermes' advice, the boy finally understood the true significance of Katya's magic. It was known as the Hell of Salvation, a name that left Katya visibly surprised. He finally came to understand the true significance of that power. The boy then clarified the true nature of Katya's magical power. Katya discovers that true magic is about communicating with the dead, rather than just controlling souls, leading her to realize she has been misusing her abilities all along. Stunned by the revelation of the power's actual origin, the boy realized that Katya had only been utilizing a small fraction of her magic's true potential. He suggested she return to the origins of her strength to try and establish a connection with the souls she summoned. Stunned by the revelation, Katya asks for guidance, and the boy explains that she must treat the souls as equals, understanding their emotions and fighting alongside them rather than simply using them as tools. Refusing to treat them as mere subordinates, Katya remains filled with doubt regarding the soul's response, yet he reassures her with his unwavering confidence in her success. The boy expressed his confidence in Katya's intuition, believing that if her desire to reach the souls was sincere, she would truly be able to connect with them. He explained that the word Geus translates to salvation in a distant land, representing a place of universal peace, and mused that the creator of such magic must have been a truly kind soul. The boy explained that the magic earned its name by providing a sanctuary for wandering spirits, leading Katya to wonder if these souls would ever find true salvation, as he pointed out that the spell's inscription was specifically crafted to reflect this purpose. Summoning her resolve, Katya extended her hands and unleashed her magic, invoking the spell known as Underworld of Salvation. Katya unleashed a massive surge of magic as she called upon the souls for assistance. Declaring her intent to defeat the prince and uphold her justice, she calls upon the surrounding souls to grant her their power for this final confrontation. The souls finally reacted, answering Katie's heartfelt plea. He agreed to assist her, pledging to fight by her side from that moment on. Katya was struck by a wave of shock and profound emotion as she realized her attempt to communicate had actually succeeded. Following Katya's command, the souls she summoned surged forward to strike the enemy. The prince stood in awe as he witnessed the incredible power of the souls fighting by her side. The prince struggled to fend off their strikes, his composure giving way to a heated fury as he realized the extent of their power. Realizing his options were dwindling, he lashed out at them for their insolence while facing the pressure of Katya's spiritual power. The prince acknowledged the strength of Katya's magic, yet he remained confident that she still lacked the power to overcome him. As he cast a spell to revive his allies, Katya was stunned to realize the souls he brought back were the very same ones she had previously summoned. The souls rallied to defend Katya, preparing to engage in battle once more. Katya realized that despite never having reached out to the dead, they were responding to her emotions and giving their all to support her. With tears in her eyes, Katya expressed her deep gratitude to the souls for their assistance. The onlookers watched in disbelief, marveling at the sheer scale of her newfound strength. The girl observed that the souls carried themselves with a sense of innocence, behaving much like young children. The boy clarified that because they resonated with Katya's heart, only the innocent side of the souls was extracted, leaving any malice behind. He explained that these weren't the individual's complete personalities, but rather a distilled, pure essence, which is why their souls manifested in such innocent forms, though he admitted he didn't fully understand the mechanics behind it. Infuriated by the relentless assault, the prince soon realized that the souls would never stop appearing. Despite the prince's formidable magical power, observers noted that it still wouldn't be enough to overcome Katya in her current state. Katya maintains her distance from the prince, using strategic positioning to keep him at bay while she strikes. As the souls in her troop formation intervene, the momentum of the battle begins to shift in her favor. Meanwhile, the prince continues to cast magic, though he remains unable to close the distance between them. They concluded that the prince had always relied on his raw talent and immense magic to overpower others, never having faced an opponent who could truly challenge him. Consequently, he lacks the tactical experience and the drive necessary to push past his limits. It's often said that those who have known only victory are the most fragile when they finally face a disadvantage. And as the souls close in, the prince feels that sudden wave of weakness for the first time. Overwhelmed by the spirits Katya had summoned, the prince cried out her name in a fit of desperation. Katya watched the scene unfold, stunned by the sheer impact of her newly awakened abilities. The prince soon realized that the strength of his flames was beginning to wane. A companion explains that his magical energy is entirely depleted, a predictable outcome after such a prolonged and intense use of his powers. Taking advantage of the prince's depleted magic, Katya moved in to deliver a direct strike with the soul's power, leaving him entirely overwhelmed and unable to resist.